So it is 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, July 18th, and I will call the study session to order. Director Workman, talk to us about pickleball.
It is froze.
Oh, yeah, it is.
That looks like the Alice in Wonderland birds that they use as melts.
I'll try and pull it up on the center computer at the same time. And I can see if I can follow.
Okay.
Yeah, they just disappeared.
Earl's gonna be quiet.
I'm gonna be quiet tonight. I don't know where it went. Yeah. I don't know where it went. It was here and it just disappeared.
Just like the note for a record that it was Counselor Flyers request, and she's immediately not here.
Let me give this one. All right. Thank you for your patience as we work through a technical issue there. I'd like to welcome everybody back from the 4th of July break. It appears everybody has all 10 fingers, and I won't ask you to take off any shoes, but 10 toes. Hope you enjoyed your holiday. This presentation this evening, I'm going to try and keep it very brief as we only have half an hour, so I'm going to try and get in and get out with my presentation. But this was at the request of Councilor McGuire. The presentation of the materials this evening are intended to help guide a council discussion related to pickleball. This council requested a study session on this topic as the popularity of the sport is rapidly growing as are noise complaints associated with the sport. Staff is looking for direction from council as to whether or not council desires to make any changes to the current regulations that govern pickleball activities. So there's a lot of information on this screen. I'm not going to go through it line by line. This is almost a Wizard of Oz, like pay no attention to the details. It's just to illustrate what the requirements are for residential accessory buildings, accessory structures, and recreational structures in the residential zone districts.
Let me just ask one question right there on that, because I hadn't looked at this in ages. But when you look at it, so in other words, in R1, you can't have an accessory structure that takes up more than 1,100 square feet.
You can't have
that right?
You could have one 1,100 square foot structure and then no other accessory buildings, accessory structures, or recreational structures. Right. Correct.
And so my first reaction was tennis courts have got more than 1,100 square feet. Pickle courts have got more than 11. I'm going, what is this 1,100 square feet? I mean, that solves the problem. This pickleball thing's over.
Sure.
Because you can't put one in.
So based on the definitions for accessory buildings, accessory structures, and recreational structures, the recreational structures don't count towards the square footage. They count towards the number, but not the square footage.
In other words, you're not subject to 1,100.
Ah, okay. So
There's a maximum number and a maximum square footage. You can have up to 3 things, and they can total 1,100 square feet combined among the 3. But like a pool or a tennis court
Doesn't count.
counts as one of the 3, but it doesn't count towards the square footage.
Correct. That's correct. And that's based on the definition for accessory structure that explicitly excludes recreational structures. So again, this is relevant for the residential zone districts. And in the O1 zone districts, so those are the O1 zone district is where all of the private clubs are here in the village. For those, there's no regulation on the number of recreational facilities that they could have, but they do have some different setbacks. And if you're interested, I can give you those. If you'll recall, council did an amendment to the code last year to add recreational structure setbacks to the code. And I can refresh your memory on that if you desire to have that. But the short version is that this is the section of code that community development through the zoning ordinance uses to regulate all sorts of recreational structures that are inclusive of pickleball, tennis, basketball courts, all those sorts of things. Because they fall in that caveat at the end of the definition that tennis or other play courts. And so really, for zoning purposes, pickleball courts are treated the same as we treat a tennis court or a basketball court or a swimming pool.
Paul, let me ask you a question then. On somebody in the driveway puts up a basketball hoop, is that already a violation? Because it's not set right against the property line. Is that already a violation?
Well, so generally the basketball hoop isn't going to require a permit and wouldn't necessarily fall within that definition of the recreational structure, because really what they're using is the driveway and not necessarily a separately poured concrete pad or something like that. And so most of the HOAs will have regulations related to the basketball hoops that you install in the front yard, but the city doesn't have anything related to that.
And if I can just come back, and again, and I apologize, but when this stuff comes up and you see it, it's the opportunity to ask. So a tennis court, a pool, pickleball court is not a recreational facility.
It is.
It is. Okay, so then tell me what I'm missing here. Sum of floor area for buildings and footprint for structures and recreational uses that are not buildings for all accessory buildings, accessory structures, and recreational facilities. That's footnote 5. That's 1,100 square feet.
So this gets into another layer, and it's based on some of the definitions we have in the code.
Right.
So generally, based on some interpretations within the definition section, if that court or pool or whatever has a fence that encloses all 4 sides, then it counts towards the square footage. If it does not, then it does not count towards the square footage, but it still counts towards the number.
In 3, there's some language about what counts and doesn't.
Okay, well, okay, go ahead. I mean,
Sorry, if this is going to bring up a question, I guess my understanding is that historically, and we're going off a little bit from pickleball courts, but I think that in footnote 3, where it references guest houses, I think we've gotten where I think there now is a separate section for houses that are not considered any longer. I think they used to be considered, guest houses used to be considered accessory dwelling units. But now I think they have their own section. Is that correct?
They do have their own section of code. That's correct.
So I think this needs an update to reflect that guest houses aren't considered residential accessory buildings anymore. Because they aren't subject to 1,100 feet. That's all based on the amount of land.
It's a function of the square footage of the lot. That's correct.
Right. So I just think that, and I think that footnote 5 needs to be corrected if it's wrong. And I'll stop there and let us get back to pickleball.
That's what that note basically says, is that they're subject to these things in the section about guest houses.
Correct. So then we'll jump into the noise requirements, and essentially the municipal code recognizes noise in a few different places, but 2 particularly that are relevant for this discussion. And again, I'm not going to get into each decibel and whether or not that's appropriate or not, but this is really just to illustrate for council that we do have DBAs that are thresholds within the code. The code acknowledges that noise is present throughout the city and that during the day there are fluctuations in noise levels that exceed noise levels at night. And additionally, the code allows for fluctuations of up to 10 additional decibels, so long as the noise does not occur more than 15 minutes in any 1 hour period. And if council is interested, this was also information in your packet, but for the benefit of the public that may be listening at home, the way that this is measured for compliance is at a height of 4 to 7 feet above grade, at or within 10 feet of the property line for the property where the noise is being generated. And since wind can impact noise readings, the time of the measurement, the wind velocity may not be more than 5 miles an hour or not more than 25 miles an hour with a windscreen on the attached microphone. And then the table on the right side of this image just gives some context for what different DBAs translate to in noise that folks are generally familiar with.
A question on that, you can go 10 higher if it's not more than 15 minutes. And I don't think it's in there, but I mean, is that 15 cumulative minutes, 15 continuous minutes? And that will be germane for pickleball.
Yes.
In my view. I mean, I'd argue it. Boom, boom. I mean, you know, it's a lot of wax as opposed to, you know, a leaf blower, which is on for 15 continuous minutes, right?
Right.
So I think that is something to think through.
And I think that that's a great point. That is one of the particular points that I wanted to raise for council is right now, I think that there is an opportunity to clarify if that is a continuous or if that is what I would call a thudding of any activity. Because right now the code doesn't give us much direction there, so we're left to interpretation. The second place where noise regulations occur is in chapter 10 of the municipal code. And I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I do want to illustrate here that the code recognizes that some noise is unlawful, that some noises, regardless of their frequency or decibel level, are unlawful and are prohibited unless in the first one there, unless there's prior permission granted. So that is a very quick and dirty version of pickleball. To summarize, within the land development code, within our zoning ordinance, pickleball courts are treated the same as any other sports court, and the code already has some noise regulations that are not necessarily specific to pickleball, but that are specific to any occurrence within the village. And so with that, I guess I would conclude my presentation. I would invite any questions from council, but really we're interested in the discussion if council desires to make any special exceptions or treatments for pickleball.
Quick question about the code acknowledges some noises are unlawful. Can you have an example?
Yeah, the best is you can't have a rock concert in your backyard, right? Let's say you're hosting a wedding reception, right? You can't have the band have amplified noise and a rock concert in the backyard as part of that reception. And that would get to that first one there where there's amplified noise, sound trucks, things like that. Those are unlawful noise that the code says that a police officer has the ability to determine that it's illegal without having to go through the steps of measuring decibels and all that sort of stuff.
My guess is that's also complaint driven though, right?
Largely would be my guess.
Yeah. As opposed to, because I can tell you right now that people do have, not rock bands, but they have
Party.
DJs is the new thing, right? I mean, in my neighborhood, I think we've had 3 already this, not on my property, but I mean, there've been 3 on my street.
It's like we weren't invited?
I wasn't. I think my kids were.
Randy.
Quick question. How many pickleball courts do we have in Cherry Hills Village at the moment?
So within the private clubs, I'm not aware of any that are permanent. They may accommodate on a case-by-case, requested basis. The short answer is we don't know because we don't treat pickleball courts differently than regular courts. And so when we get a permit application, it just says sports court on it. Sometimes it will say a pickleball court, and I'm aware of a handful that are throughout the village. But the other popular thing, and this requires no permit, is if somebody converts their existing tennis court into a pickleball court, there's no permit required for that. So we would have no idea that they had converted that.
Let me make sure I understand that. So if I had a tennis court, which I don't, but if I did, I could convert that from a tennis court to a pickleball court, no permit required?
Correct.
Just need some tape.
Yeah.
Yeah? change
Well, I
some
guess
of
that brings up a
move the
question
net.
though is, Councilor Blum mentioned, a basketball hoop in the driveway. Some people's driveways in the village easily are a size that they can put down a bunch of tape and have their own pickleball court. In fact, when I was campaigning last term, I ran into a family that had just finished doing that in their driveway because, kind of a legacy of COVID. But, I think the difficulty that I have on some of this is I really think that it's important that we focus on the noise issue, not the square footage or so much the space, but the noise at the property boundary, because in the same way I don't want to regulate a 15-year-old playing basketball in the driveway, I don't want to tell people what they're doing on their driveway, or whether it's tennis court or basketball or music or anything. I think we just, what we're really concerned about is the noise at the property line.
And I think that was one of the comments that, I think it was the Centennial person that voted against it. And she said that. She said, hey, is this a pickleball problem or a noise problem? And she thought it was a noise problem. I think it is too. And then in addition to which Randy's question of how many courts do we have, how many noise complaints do we get and how many are related to pickleball, if any?
Anecdotally, I can tell you I get a handful of phone calls from folks that talk about their neighbors playing pickleball, that sort of stuff. I spoke with Supervisor Reynolds in the police department, who oversees the neighborhood services folks who would ultimately be doing noise enforcement. He said he couldn't remember a formal complaint for one, but I guess I would ask the chief if you're aware of any. None that I'm aware of that are formal.
So none?
I'm assuming none. No,
Yeah.
none.
So,
And then how about other noise complaints?
Same thing. I wouldn't consider pickleball much different than any other sport or activity that generates noise. Occasionally, folks will call us regarding their neighbor that's doing something that they believe may be in violation of a noise regulation.
So for the most part, we don't, it is a serene village and we don't have a lot of noise complaints. And so far, pickleball hasn't disrupted that sereneness.
Again, anecdotally, and the chief may be able to answer this more articulately. Well, now he definitely will be able to answer it more articulately than I can. We get a handful of calls. Somebody is out in their pool and has their stereo on too loud. We get those kinds of phone calls too. And I would say, the difference between pickleball and those sorts of phone calls are about the same.
Chief?
Yeah, and just to kind of close the loop on that, so two questions. One on the pickleball, our records search indicated 0 complaints on pickleball specifically in terms of general noise ordinance complaints. The answer was sort of a handful, maybe 1 or 2 a month, and typically almost all of those, in fact, are met with compliance after a verbal warning. We take very little enforcement action in terms of a citation or summons. Most people are very compliant in eradicating the noise issue.
So
But at the same time, pickleball is not one of those, you can't say, turn down the pickleball like you do turn down the stereo, short of just not playing.
Right.
So I do know that certain neighborhoods have, I know that Congress Park in Denver, has terminated their pickleball courts because they're too close to the residents. And again, I think this kind of goes to the question of the noise at the property line, that if Denver really wanted to have pickleball in Congress Park, they could probably find a place interior to the park. They just happen to be using old tennis courts that were existing there. They're just backed right up to residential. So, does Village Club Arapahoe, Cherry Hills, or Glenmore back to residential to the point that, at least on the club level, because those are really the ones that I think that make substantial investments and need to know before they make an investment whether or not this is a good idea or not. Individual homeowners, I think they're an amenity to the house, but not one of the purposes of the club, for instance. So,
And I don't think a homeowner is going to be playing pickleball on their home pickleball court, 8 hours a day.
yeah, I-
Whereas a club pickleball court is probably used more regularly than an individual one.
And my only comment to that is that, just as we've seen people rent out unofficially their riding area for somebody to give lessons at, I think that certain people in the village do allow tennis pros to use their courts for tennis lessons that do go on a period of time. But I agree that generally you're talking about maybe a couple hours in a row of pickleball versus an all-day activity.
So I'm inclined to agree that really, we need to be talking about the noise, and whether you're playing pickleball or tennis or whatever activity it is that you're doing that might be making noise. And so I do think we should maybe talk a little bit about this concept of 15 minutes. What does that mean? Is that the appropriate limit? And I think probably one of the largest noise complaints you would receive, if I had to guess, is barking dogs. I mean, if a dog to me, that's similar to pickleball, right? It's not a constant noise the entire time. But if a dog is outside barking intermittently for 15 minutes, I think that qualifies under our noise ordinance, even though it's probably not specifically worded that way. I don't know if we need to be more clear or.
Well, that does count, doesn't it? I mean, if you got a dog that's barking, that counts for noise, right?
That's where I'd look to the chief. My understanding is yes.
Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Because I think that is right. It's the noise thing. And the issue is here, isn't what we're really talking about, is clarifying and making sure that we are communicating with our public before people start investing lots of money.
Yeah.
Because the issue is that, and it's done, you do it, 100 feet away from, whatever, wherever you test it, the DBA levels, whatever that is. And, I'm in an R1, and there's a tennis court over there, and, my neighbor, he's one of the guys with the party. I can hear this stuff, right? It ain't a big deal because it's a long ways away. And if they put a pickle court in there, I'd hear it, and it actually would annoy me because I hate that. But the point is it would not reach 70 dB. I mean, it just wouldn't. Katie, if your neighbor put in one, you're going to go nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, and it would be at that point in time. And it's important that the people know and say, hey, we're not going to allow that, right?
Well, and maybe that's just a simple, nothing's ever simple, but is there some way that when people apply for a permit for a recreational facility, that we make sure that they are aware of our noise ordinance? I mean, I would look at it and say, if you came to me just as a friend and said, hey, I'm thinking of putting a pickleball court in, I would say, hey, that's great. You should know that if you plan on playing pickleball for more than 15 minutes, you might be in violation of our noise ordinance. And, if that doesn't work for you, you might think twice about doing that.
That's because you're nicer than I am. I'd say you will be in violation of our noise ordinance.
Well, if they do it for less than 15 minutes, or if it's not, who knows? But I think if people are informed that, pickleball is known to be a somewhat loud sport, and we do have a noise ordinance in place, constructed at your own risk, you make your own choice. I think that might be.
And I would just say operationally, that would be very easy for us to do with those types of permits.
Katie, you know, it seems to me there's a conflict because we talk about the maximum noise level, and then you look at the code talking about what is an unreasonable noise. Now, pickleball, I don't know if anybody's measured it, but it can't exceed whatever the 55 or 65 decibels. It can't exceed that, but you do hear the sound. So does the fact that playing pickleball and going back and forth, does that under our code constitute an unreasonable noise? And I think that's the big issue. If it doesn't, then there's nothing we can do about it.
Well,
Because
I
it's
guess
not
the
going to
question
exceed the maximum noise level.
No, but we've got the decibel business. I mean, unreasonable noise is vague, I think.
Very vague.
But when we get down to decibels at particular times of day and so on and so forth, that and how it's to be measured.
Okay, you go 10 feet off somebody's property line where they have a pickleball court, it's not going to exceed these numbers.
Well, I know, some of them are kind of low.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about
It's
that.
like a conversation.
Well, there's got to be data. What is
Yeah,
the,
it's
I
right
mean,
here.
we got a lot of these, I can't remember right now if it listed in them, but, what is the noise level of pickleball?
Well, there was a
4 feet above ground.
70,
10 feet
it's
above-
No, I
70
know where it's
decibels
measured.
at 100 feet.
Pardon me?
70 decibels at 100 feet.
Is our standard.
It's on
No,
page
no, 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 no.
47.
No, that's
I'm
what
sorry.
the-
Is
referenced
yeah.
in the.
is referenced in here.
It's on page 47 of the packet.
Yeah. So it probably will, but I guess it's that sustained, that question of what does 15 minutes mean?
Well, I
Right?
think-
If it's 70 decibels every 2 seconds or every second for 15 minutes, is that, and I would argue that it does because it's like a barking dog, right? But
I think that's where we should clarify. I mean, if a barking dog is intermittent and yet if that extends over 15 minutes, then that's a violation. I think we just need some clarity there around what constitutes continuous when you have intermittent noise. I mean, you could make the same argument with a weed whacker or a gas
Lawnmower.
blower. I shut it off every couple minutes and get it going again. Is that? I think that's still continuous noise.
Well, I guess the question that I have is, it sounds to me like pickleball, because nobody plays pickleball for 15 minutes. They play, a
Hour.
typical match
Yeah.
is much longer than 15 minutes. So my question is 70 a number when we look at our little table and we're in the loud category, I guess, of traffic and vacuums, but we have people running lawn service operations for hours at a time on each of their properties. Is this really something that, rather than worrying about continuous versus episodic noise, is this something that for pickleball or other sporting activities or something, whatever the term is, we should be having a different standard?
well, so the lawn equipment is, if I'm correct, is treated more like construction noise, because that's another one where you can't tell people they can't build their house for more than 15 minutes.
I was going to remind council that we are running out of time, and we are hoping to get some direction tonight on, should we pursue this in any form or fashion, or do you feel the existing codes are okay, or do we need to do some other work that we haven't identified yet?
I would like to, I like your collective comments about advising our applicants, whether on residential uses or at any of the, for sure at the clubs, when they're going to invest a bunch of money into new facilities, advising them to look at section XYZ out of our code very carefully, because there could come a day where somebody from the city's out there with a decibel reader and we're getting complaints and we have to measure and there may be a violation. And I don't know what the remedy is at that point. If they have to tear it down, I would
Stop playing.
think.
Stop playing.
No,
Just have to
just
stop
can't
playing.
play.
Stop playing. Well, you might as
Muffle your
well
ball.
not build it then.
Rackets.
And that's what I'm worried about. I know we probably all are, which is somebody goes out, spends the money, and then we say you can't do it. And that I don't want to see happen.
Well, we issued them a permit to build the recreational facility,
Subject to our code, though.
Well, subject to the
Yeah.
code, but we do that with lots of things that, we have issued fence permits and found out they weren't in the right place. We don't take.
Well, I think that, so we do have like 1 minute left. I think the consensus that I'm hearing is that the code itself is probably okay. The concern is that we don't want residents or clubs or to make these large investments only then to find out that they can't use it in the way that they planned. And so since a lot of those things don't ever come through any kind of council process or review process, I think if maybe we could direct staff to propose a way, maybe there's some sort of attachment that goes with the application for a sport court or something along those lines.
Off the top of my head, there's a few different things we can do to implement that. One is have basically a waiver that says, here's the noise ordinance. By signing it, you agree that you've been made aware of this and you'll follow it, right? We can put stamps on the approved plans that say something to the same effect of so operationally, there's a variety of things we can do, and all of them are relatively easy for us to implement.
Well,
Randy, final comment.
Yeah, there's also this question of converting existing tennis courts and no permitting process involved
Sport courts.
there.
Well, then they didn't invest more in it, so.
No, but I think there's still going to be some investment and maybe some, as a part of this proposal, general communication to the community that says, if you do this, there's ramifications for the people who don't go through the permitting process. Some general information.
Yeah, we have a variety of outlets where we can,
I also think again, every time something comes up and we look at our code, we don't look at it regularly, but we see things. I do think we ought to do something with that 15 minutes and clarify what it is and what it means. And my sense is what it means is if you're doing something for 15 minutes, regularly, irregularly, including on and off and on, it's a 15-minute process in terms of the project or the process or the game or the enterprise or whatever the hell it is. I think it needs to be clarified. And then that thing about unreasonable, that made me goosey too when I read that, and I thought, man, there's a truck driving through that baby. But again, you want flexibility, but.
Well, and I'll wrap it up. And first of all, thank you for your indulgence on this. And I think we have direction on where we need to go. We'll get an interpretation about the 15 minutes from the city attorney and see if we need to bring that further. It does say for a period of 15 minutes. So how that's interpreted is another issue. So, but we will look into that. And if we need to bring that forward, we can bring that to council at a later date.
I just want to mention real quick, I think that my closing comment is I haven't written my Crier article. This might be a potential question or a subject in a Crier article. And then the other piece is that I think that, right now we don't have a pickleball problem. So unless we want to prospectively get ahead of it, this is not yet ripe for us to really take a look at yet.
I think the conversation was to maybe get out a little bit in front of it, but okay. Thank everyone for your comments. I will call the regular council meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Eber?
Here.
Councillor Holen?
Here.
Councillor Wheel?
Happy to be here.
Councillor Sheldon?
Here.
Councillor Blum?
Here.
Councillor McGuire is absent.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next is a presentation from the Cherry Hills Land Preserve regarding the 2024 Quincy Farm Annual Plan. Manager Black.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of council. So before I turn it over to the Land Preserve and we get into the details of their 2024 plan, we wanted to take the opportunity for a quick recap of the progress we've made so far this year. So, as you'll recall, one of the main goals in the 2023 annual plan, which we're currently operating under, was creating public access to the east side of the farm. So that began in January 2023. And Parks and Facilities Maintenance staff have dedicated many hours for getting ready to that for that public access, repairing high priority items at the farm, and generally improving and beautifying the east side of the farm. So I will just run through some pictures of our before shots and then today. So beginning in December, we started working to get the farm ready to open in January. So we added a gate at the east side driveway, rules signs consistent with other open spaces in the village, and created an accessible pathway for pedestrians to enter and an accessible parking space that's just outside of this picture. Moving further into the farm, this is a project that Parks worked on during the winter, and this was really initiated by Linda Bear, one of the board members of CHLP. So as you can see, the gates that were on either side of these buildings were very badly deteriorated since we've taken over. They have had years of neglect. One was barely a gate, as you can see in that upper picture. So park staff saved the hardware in that case and basically rebuilt this whole gate, repainted them, and hung them for this spring. We've also worked to clean out this lean-to space, remove some of the old farm equipment that was there, farm items that were left, and park staff leveled that ground underneath the lean-to. We purchased and built picnic tables so that CHLP could have this space to get into the shade if they're having an outdoor activity or out of the rain if it starts to rain, so that they had a more usable space for programs. We have removed interior fencing throughout the farm to really make the barnyard a more cohesive open space. And repaired, you can see some of the Dutch doors that were missing tops. We've repaired those and improved that. This is the access off the Highline Canal Bridge. This gate was also deteriorating, so this was rebuilt with the original hardware as well. And we added, again, rule signs and hours signs. And this is one of the largest recent projects. This is the East Side Farmhouse. The walkway up to the main door there was so cracked and deteriorated. So we demoed that existing walkway, worked with a contractor to pour new concrete, and park staff, as you can see, has planted new garden beds in this location that are low water and pollinator friendly. And we've replaced the bluegrass that was in front of the house with buffalo grass, which is less water intensive over time, trying to be responsible stewards of our resources going forward. That's ADA accessible now too. Oh, yes, and Jay is reminding me it's also now ADA accessible. So there's still plenty of work to do out at the farm, but we're excited to be underway with this 2023 plan and with the progress we've made so far. It's been really exciting watching people walk across the bridge for the first time and kind of discover the farm for the first time, since this is their first opportunity to visit as aside from structured programming. So that's been very refreshing. And we're looking forward to building on that momentum in 2024. And I will turn it over to the Land Preserve to talk about those details.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you.
Wear it on Friday walks.
Exactly.
There you go.
Uniform.
Adorable.
Cool.
Hello. Wow, this is so exciting. I've never even been in this room. So thanks for having us, and I'm excited to be here. Okay, to the right. Excellent. So I'm going to start off and then pass it off to Laura. But what I wanted to revisit is the vision, and let's just start with this because that's what this is all about. It has not changed really since 2023, but I think Harold Skranstad, who is here tonight, helped craft that first sentence, and I find it inspiring. So Quincy Farm will be an integral part of the educational and recreational infrastructure of the city of Cherry Hills, a place of experiences that remind our community of its agricultural heritage, a place of natural beauty and open spaces, a place that provides a rich habitat for local flora and fauna, and a place that centers and enriches the Cherry Hills Village community. So I don't know about you, but I find that inspiring. And that's kind of what I've experienced in the last several months once the season began. So to continue the vision, having the barnyard be, we're calling it the educational hub of the whole property, with the big barn being the central visual element that really provides the program space. There are other buildings in the barnyard that also help. The lean-to that Emily just showed, we had the Raptor event there, the baby barn with goats, visiting goats. So this whole barnyard really lends itself well to being the educational hub. And then, of course, the west side, the historical with the Hopkins House and the natural elements of the nature trail, the pastures, the gardens, the lawn around the main house. So we wanted to talk about some accomplishments that have happened. So the most important one is new executive director. Yay! So that's me and my background. I've been in corporate America forever. This is so much more fun to be like a farmer. It's awesome. And my background is in sales and marketing and relationship building and strategic organization, lots of stuff. And I'm also a resident here, so I just want it noted that this is it's our 25th anniversary of living here this month in Cherry Hills. I'm like, when did we move here? So I'm a longtime resident, and I moved here for the same reasons everyone else did: open space, access to trails, connecting with nature. So for me, it's a perfect job. So site improvements, Emily went through some. And I want to point out these signs here that Linda Bear, again, provided generously, and I think they look awesome out there. So, painting the chicken coop and redoing the gates, all that has been so exciting. But we still have a lot more to do. And I want to bring that up specifically at this point because we have events there, people stop by, and when it looks, not well kept, people don't get as excited to be there for us to fundraise against. So it's been the first 6 months. That's understandable. We also had more rain than literally ever, short-staffed, here at the village, and many, many years of, deferred maintenance. So we've talked to the city. Our team meeting last month was great because we all agreed terrific advances, but there's still more to do there. So in terms of site improvements, we're so thankful of all the things that the city has done so far, which is we think it's great. Next is one of the accomplishments that we think is the fact that the city and CHLP gets together every month. And we really are creating this excellent partnership. There's full transparency, and it's been a pleasure to work with Emily, Chris, and Jim. And next is the outreach and educational programs. And so for the programs, we've tried some new things. I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. Different ideas, different audiences, and we've had some really good success. It's awesome to see people come, and I'm talking about the structured programs at this point. So we had quite a few that were delayed or canceled because of rain, hence the need for the barn to act as a place where we can do our programs. In terms of outreach, we launched an ambassadors program, and that has been really great. We have 12 residents and they are spread out demographically as well as geographically across the village. And their job is really to be advocates for us. And I've seen some of them come to our events so far, tell people to come. They're signing up for committees. We've got a fundraiser. So we think that particular outreach has been and will continue to be very successful. And we started again with a quarterly newsletter. We do crier ads every month. So I think that's been very effective in increasing engagement as well as getting people to our events. So let's move into now the 2024 initiatives outline. Sorry, this is like weird. So we want to start off with programs because that really is what we're all about here at CHLP. And our programming actually helps drive all the site improvements, fundraising, outreach. So that's why we're starting here. Our audience is young families, and it is adults interested in nature, sustainability, history. And to some degree, school children are another group. We have one event coming up this summer with Kent Denver Summer School, where we have 20 or 37-year-olds coming for a horse program. So that should be very exciting. In terms of the direction, strategically, we want to have high quality programs. We do not just want to fill a schedule with, check, and have no one come, or when they come, be disappointed. So high quality is one of our goals for this and for next year. And to be able to do that, we need really strong partnerships. So we have had partnerships with educational organizations like Denver Audubon, the Raptor Foundation, but we want to continue in that direction with the Butterfly Pavilion, with the Nature Conservancy, with Botanic Gardens, Chatfield, because with really strong content and people who come in, we can deliver high quality events. And finally, on this topic, I want to talk about, we have 3 buckets. So for every event we do, it has to fall into one of these: nature and conservation, sustainability, and heritage history. So you can see that those all support the conservation values of this property. And nature and conservation could be bees, birds, that kind of program. Sustainability is, our gardening, any sort of speaker series on water, on trees, on pasture stewardship. So we're trying to really focus on those 3 areas and plug in events that support these conservation values. Metrics. That's something I'm working on this year and will continue to do so next year. How did you hear about the event? What's the attendance? Give me feedback. What are the costs of the event? What did we charge, and did that work in terms of limiting, attendance? Is it repeatable for the same audience, or is this just you come once and you go, that was cool, I don't want to come back there? So the metrics, that's really something I'm working on for this year. And then, because a picture paints 1,000 words, I want to bring up our website here and talk about the programs. So you'll see we have here the recent programs. And we keep the past programs up on our website because it helps anyone who visits here to say, oh, wow, I didn't know they did that. Or, oh, I was out of town, I hope they do that again. The other reason is you'll see there are a lot of links here, and this is kind of what I call value add for these programs. If you look at the seed to harvest, the second from the right, there's a downloadable excellent gardening guide. We gave away little tomato plants at the event, so really trying to make them high quality and super engaging. And then you'll see here our upcoming events. I invite all of you to come to the book discussion. Where we have Mary Fran Park from Kent Denver, who's head of the science group. She's going to be leading our discussion on this excellent landmark book about, nature deficiency. What is it called? I can't even read it from here. Anyway, it's Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv. Moving down, you'll see when I was talking about the heritage and history bucket of our programs, horses fall into that, clearly because of Cat Anderson's legacy, as well as Ed Honan, raised quarter horses. So here is and I think Katie is singing at this.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
my daughter.
Your daughter.
daughter.
Okay. Well, I heard it was you and your daughter, but anyway. And then finally, we have one event, October 1st. It was called the Trail Walk before. It has now been renamed Adventures in Nature. So we are, let me go up here and show you one more thing. So under news, we've got our newsletters, but also a gallery. And each line represents an event. And I show this to you because it's filled with so many happy people. And you can see this is Creeks and Critters at Woody Hollow on Sunday. This woman is on Parks and Rec. This is my grandnephew. Is he not the cutest? And this, so you see children, families up top. Then you see this is the adult bird walk. And we had quite a lovely group there going from the pond around the nature trail. This down here was the raptor. Thank you. And here was the gardening event where we gave away little tomato plants. And I don't know if anyone was here. Laura, that's her horse on the left. This was Earth Day on April 22nd, and it was 29 degrees, and we had 4 inches of snow. We were expecting 105 people. 67 came. They braved the elements to come. That may have been because I sent an email out threatening a lot of people, especially those in Cherry Ridge. So that was really exciting. But the point of showing you all this is what I'm seeing with programming is, yes, it's part of our mission and part of the conservation values of providing education. But it's also this amazing way to connect. We had a long-term resident at that flower thing. She walked out of there saying, Ellen, first of all, I hadn't seen her in 10, 15 years. She said, I saw 2 people, we're not on sidelines, some of us, watching our kids. She was ecstatic. She went home. She was the first one to sign up for our fundraiser. I didn't even have a landing page set up. I don't even know how she did that. But another person who was at that place said, come here, I was at her house the other day. Look at my tomato plant that I walked away with. So we're getting people excited to have this place where there's a sense of community. And whether it's families or adults, everyone seems to be enjoying it. And each time we have an event, the majority of those people go home and tell others, you need to go. Have you ever been, on to Quincy Farm? So that's all I have. Here is Laura as we move to, let me get out of here first. And go here. Access in 2024.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is fun. I will tell you that I took on this job of presidency of Quincy Farm a little bit reluctantly, but it has been very cool. What we are looking at right now, and as we go into 2024, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the overlap of 2023 and 2024, is really an iterative process. We are trying with the city, with Emily, to see what works, what doesn't work, to learn from all of these programs. And I will tell you, we learned a lot. We are learning a lot from these programs. We're learning what people like, what they don't like, where they get excited, where they're, kind of blasé. I mean, it's important information because it is a partnership, and it's a partnership with our citizens. So it's really amazingly fun. Before I get to public access to the west side, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, pastures. because this is something that's going from 23 into 24. And I'll talk first about the east side. The east side pastures remain overgrazed. They were, in essence, destroyed, these pastures. This is not due to anything that the city did. This was long before the city took possession of this property. Overgrazing is specifically set forth in the conservation easement as being a prohibited activity. Someday, maybe I can talk about selective enforcement of the conservation easement. But what I really want to talk about right now are the pastures. This is a farm. And that's important. These are pastures, or were pastures. This means that it is not prairie, it is not wildflowers, not bluegrass. These are pastures. It's a farm. The city, with all good intentions, killed the weeds that had grown up in the overgrazed pasture. And the only weeds that grow were the ones the horses wouldn't eat. So those are really bad weeds. And they attempted to kill them. They replanted with wildflower and natural seed. It didn't work. And it's because these are overgrazed dry land pastures. And interestingly enough, that's actually a thing. And the experts on this, the CSU Extension. So with the consent and the cooperation of the city, we are bringing in CSU to evaluate how to reclaim the east side pastures. What is clear to date is it's not an easy or quick process. There is no pasture ferry going bibbidi-bobbidi-boo and you have a pasture. This is actually a farming thing, and we're going to have to probably farm those pastures, do cover crops, create nutrients in the soil that will eventually nourish the grass. So we're in the process of doing that. I'm talking because this is something that's moving from 23 to 24. We are analyzing dry land pastures from a ranching farming standpoint because it's ranching and farming. Those are the people who have the answers. Now, on the other side, we're also looking at it because we know that the irrigation pond is no longer fed from the canal. And so we've also asked them to help us with the city, and Jeff's great, to start to analyze that because, again, it's farming. These are pastures. They do not have native grasses in them, or minimal. And, so this is something that we can do, that we can bring to the forefront. We can communicate with these people. We can do the research. So in 23, we've started it. In 24, working with Emily and Jeff. Hopefully we can figure out a way to do this that makes sense. But it isn't going to be quick on the east side, through no fault of the city. Okay, so now we're going to go into access in 2024 because this relates to pastures as well. We have set forth, as we had in 2023, that in 2024 we would have access, both what we would call structured access, which is a bird walk, and unstructured access, which means people would be limited to walking on the nature trail and from dawn to dusk, essentially. Same hours as the rest of the parks. And they would have access to the lawn and those gardens back there that the city actually planted at quite substantial expense. So what else does this do? This gives our citizens, and there will be signs, this is here, this is an oak tree, over here is there, whatever. But this really fits with our master plan. What are 3 things that people wanted? 3, maybe 4. Wildlife, trees, open space, actually 4, and scenic views. None of which can be really enjoyed unless they can actually get onto the property. So this is what we are asking to do. I understand that the attorney has a couple changes, so we will incorporate those to that issue. The nature trail location, it is there. It's plowed. Well, no, excuse me, mowed. It's mowed. The grass is up to here, you guys. It's mowed. And let me reiterate, the pasture on the west side, the grass is up to here. So it is mowed. The expectation is that people would go through there. Historically, the thought was that would get mowed in a different location, and that would be better for the pastures. We are waiting for our report now from CSU, and they indicated verbally that would not be the case, that it is better to have a permanent trail because then only that part becomes a trail and the rest is natural. We're waiting for their response on that, so we'll get back to you. And I will say there isn't anything that we're doing in 2024 that is not an essential part of the conservation values. So let me see. Let me go on to the next. Site improvements, Big Barn. We did an RFP for a feasibility study, and then the feasibility study was for an adapted reuse of the Big Barn. That is a term of art. And it means taking a historic building and keeping it historic. How can you change or adapt a use? We know this barn is not going to be a stable. So by definition, we will be reusing it for something. We're using rogue architecture. And I'm going to use a sports analogy here. We are punching above our weight. I hope that's the right analogy. These people, if you look them up, are huge commercial, but they architects. But they have a soft spot for historic, and they don't talk about it a lot because they don't make any money on it. They do it because they love it, and that's why they responded to our RFP. That's also why they came in on our budget. They're not going to make any money on this. We met with them, and it wasn't just the architect who's heading it up. The principal of the company came and met with us and was as excited as the rest of us were about this building. So we will be getting back from them a variety of uses, costs, ideas. We gave them really strict instructions. Obviously, the exterior is historic. Can't do anything with that. You don't want to. It's lovely. The interior, we've asked, it's a barn. We keep it a rustic barn. There's not going to be heat. There's not going to be air conditioning. It's a rustic barn. The nature trail I've already talked about. Hopkins House. What we would like to do in 2024 is start to look at what the Hopkins House could be used for by the city, by our citizens, what makes sense, because that will then inform what does it cost to redo the interior or not, etc. So we have nothing planned for the Hopkins House. What we have planned is looking at the Hopkins House. So with Emily, and we know that it is not in the greatest of shape, but that will probably be the next thing. The next one is the pond. And again, it is looking at the pond. There have been engineering reports on the pond. I have read them. Again, the pond is an irrigation pond. It is not a natural pond. It is a man-made pond. This is an area of great interest to the neighbors for obvious reasons, because they back up to it. And even those neighbors that don't back up to it, the pond is an important part of their lives because of the wildlife. But they are concerned about it. They have tremendous knowledge of it. And I hope will be very helpful in what I see as a review of the pond. Again, people like wildlife. Can you balance wildlife with irrigation? If not, what are the options? What are the costs? I will tell you, when I talk to people in our community about the pond, I had no idea so many people have ponds. They have ponds in their backyard. They have ponds on their ranches. We have a lot of people with ranches in this community. So we have a lot of knowledge, and including going out to experts on this and having experts look at what's going there. And I think that this is the time to really explore this pond so that we assure that it exists going into the future, if at all possible. The next one is landscape, natural resource, and maintenance plans. We think now that we have a much better feel for the property and a better understanding of how the city works, we would like to go out and start to explore these issues for the entire property. So the natural resources, we've already talked. I have not. Ellen, I talk to Harriet all the time. She's my neighbor, but I didn't talk to her about this. They are doing a natural resource survey for the High Line. She thinks we can piggyback off of that. That's the type of thing we'd like to do because, again, the High Line is part of the farm. The trees are part of the farm. It's all understanding how these work, creating areas that you can say, okay, here's what we're doing here, here's what we're doing here, here's how we're going to maintain this. Does it make sense for the city to do this? Does it make sense to go outside? Does it make sense to let volunteers do it, et cetera? So that's important because it is important for the future of this property that it look like everybody wants it to look. Or there might be different views. But anyway, that's another thing we're going to do. We expect to hire some experts in that area to advise. The last one is signage. We're carrying over from last year our signage, which is the part where as people walk around, they will have educational signage through the property, both on the east side and the west side. This is part of our programming. It is a cost we are sharing with the city and doing. So there we go. Okay. Next one. Outreach. I don't know how much you guys want on that. New website, advertising, social media, ambassador program. I don't think we really discussed it. It's in your handout. These are people from all over our community. This was in 23. We're continuing it into 24. We're going to expand the ambassadors, and the role of the ambassador is to spread the word to their neighbors, to their friends. That is how Cherry Hills works best, is person to person. So we are using that to bring forward public citizen knowledge of the Quincy Farm. Neighbor input, I mentioned that. We've met with the neighbors. They're going to have their own opinions on how that meeting went, but I thought it went great. So we are aligned on the pond very much. We are aligned on several issues. They have really a wealth of information, and we will continue to work with them. I think that they fully understand that this is a public process and appreciate the opportunity to not only talk to us, but to come and talk to you. Partners, we are just working our tail off to find partners. This is going to take time. Grants are not going to be forthcoming for a while until we know what we're asking money for. So that is, but we do have, many partners that are coming forward just to help out. But, that's it on that. Let's see. The fundraiser is, our fundraising is, you'll see last year we raised over $120,000, and they had only been asking money for a short time. We have an annual campaign for this year. We have an evening at Quincy Farm fundraiser, which is September 15th, which was, I just informed, is Rosh Hashanah, and my sincere apologies. Won't do it next year. I'll look at the calendar. Actually, I wasn't looking at the calendar for this one, but I do apologize. That won't happen again. Oh, thank you. Any questions?
Questions? We'll start. Anybody?
I've got one.
Councilor
I've
Sheldon.
got a couple. And this may be more for staff or various council members or the mayor than you, Laura. I don't know. But how your ideas about access to the west side starting in 2024, I'm just curious how that is going to work with the coordination and communication that we've been having with Colorado Open Lands.
I actually can't answer that because
Okay,
Emily
great.
talked to us today. It went, our 2024 plan went to the attorney who is coordinating with Colorado Open Lands apparently. And he has some suggested changes to that language and access as we've set it forth. And that I guess we'll be showing you at the study session in August. Because I've not seen it. I don't know what his changes are. So I think it's just
When
to
you say his
clarify.
changes, you're talking about COL's attorney?
There's just, we're weighing in. We've received this draft in my office and we've taken a look at it and we are coordinating with some other folks to be sure that we are going to be sure that you have a plan recommended to you that will
Perfect.
help in
Thank
those
you.
communities.
Well, and I think also I think it's fair to say that, we are engaged, as you know, Councilor Sheldon, with COL, and we will continue to be engaged with them moving ahead. This plan in the interim, CHLP has been advised to continue to develop a plan that they believe and that we believe and staff believe is consistent with the conservation values. Those are moving along on parallel paths. At some point, but the issue is that's what we're doing. And one of the things that we will always have to look at is that when the plans are presented to us, do we agree that it's consistent with the conservation easement and the conservation values? And to the extent it is, then we move ahead. And that's, I think, what the Land Preserve is presenting to us and staff is presenting to us at this time.
Right. And we do believe that. But, this is why you have council looking at it because it's, not that we would ever be biased. So.
Other questions? Other comments?
A number of council and a number of people know that my sister was a former pony clubber back in the day. So if there's ever anything that she can provide you from a historical standpoint, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to help get involved on anything that she can. Pictures. Okay, I will see what I can do about pictures. Wanted to thank you for the presentation of the annual plan and the status report. I think that Quincy Farm has always been an opportunity for us to do what is one of my favorite things to do, is community building. And the number of activities that are going on is not too large for the property to handle and not too small so that it is underutilized. I think that it gives our community an opportunity. And when I say our community, I don't just mean our immediate community, because I think it gives sort of a regional approach. The fact that the Hopkins House is one of the only remaining structures in all of Arapahoe County makes it very interesting, much the same way is it 14 Mile House property or 4 Mile House? Is
4 Mile House.
Yeah, well, two different properties, 4 Mile House in Glendale, but also the one out in eastern Arapahoe County, not so much eastern, I guess, Parker Road. At any rate, the other part about it is, with respect to the programming, I am hopeful that in not only the sustainability, not only the high quality programming, but I would like to encourage an awful lot of sustainability type of programming. I think that goes hand in glove with one of our major additions to the recent master plan revision, and helps us move forward to meeting that master plan objective of increased education, increased implementation of more sustainable practices, not only within the village operations, but also for our community members as a whole. I think that this type of programming can lead the village members to increase sustainability practices that are only that much more important as we go forward. The other thing I wanted to say is I think that the use of the farm is a part of our answer to what we talked about last time on Senate Bill 213 and what it is that we're able to offer and provide to the regional area that we are a part of, in addition to just focusing only on affordable housing, what a type of green, open space, things like that we can do. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you had a picture earlier on people actually in the canal,
That was Woody Hollow.
right, Woody Hollow, okay,
And,
excuse me.
and the goal would be to move that to the pond when
Okay.
it's safe.
My only comment to you is I am, the fact that we own this piece of the canal has always been something that I've mentioned at every opportunity, that I want people in the canal to learn what it is. You feel the magnitude of the volume of water by being in the bottom of the canal, of course, when it's not containing water. But to understand that my sister used to run her horses up and down for strengthening them during when it was dry, and when it was wet, the same thing. They would run against the current. That was actually one of the uses that was very well utilized by people here in the village. But the fact that we do own this piece of the canal is, I think, an opportunity for a lot of the educational programming that you touch on here, and I really encourage you to do that. I think with respect to the rebuilding of the soils that you mentioned, I know a number of people within the village have animals that would love to have a source for their manure to go somewhere. I was going to say that the village generated manure, but then I thought a little bit about that and said that we should probably phrase that a little bit differently. I mentioned that dawn to dusk programming of 7 to 7, I think it is not coincidental with dusk and dawn all throughout the year, obviously, and that there are an awful lot of wildlife opportunities that happen before 7 o'clock, i.e. sunrise and sunset, that it would sure be nice to be able to participate on a periodic basis to be able to make use of those. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on.
Well, and that's a good point, Rob. We hadn't, our public access just to walk on the trails and whatever, that was dawn to dusk. That is not programmatic, structured. I don't think we want people on while it's dark without having somebody with them. So we do have the stargazing. It got canceled because of the rain. And the birding program, these people come really early in the winter to start to count birds. Right. So it is dark when they start. So we would anticipate continuing that.
Okay. With respect to the signage component that you mentioned, it seems like everybody's going to the idea of having some type of an electronic link in addition or in place of hard signs in the field. It seems like everybody's got a smartphone that we can have information conveyed on, given that we can maybe, I don't know if we're going to have internet at the facility or not, but it seems like that's a way that we can end up not having quite as much, for those who look at it like this, is clutter of hard signs and more still ability to convey information that we choose to. As you go by something, maybe a beep pops up. It sounds like the marketing people know an awful lot that when I walk through King Soopers, if I'm looking at X, I might want to look at Y. Maybe it's the same thing here. And then my final comment would be that I certainly hope with 60 days in advance that we can find a way to reschedule the 9:15 event.
Well, Ellen, there you go. Thank you very much. If there are any more questions, are there any more questions?
Yeah,
Councilor Holland.
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate the presentation. I think the comment that both you and Ellen made, "A picture's worth 1,000 words." I think it's extraordinary what's taken place at the farm over this period of time. I mean, and I really applaud you. I think we, the community, owe a great deal to staff and to the land preserve for what you've gotten done. And I'm looking forward to seeing that continue. To that end, and as I understand in August, we'll be coming back and addressing this again, right? And so what I saw here was good, but you know me, I'm always like going, yeah, okay, when I read, this is the 2024 plan, I immediately go, okay, without more, that's December of 2024. I hope that there will be, and I know it's an iterative process, but I want to know a little bit more, we can't get that specific, but a little bit more about, okay, here's kind of when we think the pond evaluation will be done, and that will then translate into, when work might be done or when the viewing platform might be put on. Here's kind of when we think that the feasibility study will be done, and then that will translate into, because again, kudos. I mean, I think anybody that does go out there and see the farm sees a lot happening in a very positive manner, consistent with the conservation values and a resource that the community can be proud of. And I want to know that that process is just going to continue on without missing a beat. And I'm sure that's what you have in mind, but I'll be, that's where I'll be coming from when we come back in August, so.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, timeline for sure, and really budgeting is the other part.
Right, exactly.
So they're go hand.
Absolutely. Other than that, again, I think it's fantastic, and the programs that are going on, and I think it's amazing the number of people that we have that are showing up at these programs. So, and it's only going to get better, I'm sure. So,
Mayor Pro Tem Wheel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add my comments. It's really refreshing. I know it's been quite a journey, all the planning and the work and all of that's gone on for literally years. It is so refreshing to see reality starting to blossom. I think yourself, prior folks at Land Preserve, the staff here, it's just so gratifying to see the direction. There's programming, there's fundraising, there's organization. I mean, all the elements are coming together. So my compliments. Keep up the great work.
And I guess we should also shout out to Susan and Harold back there, who've got a lot to do with the accomplishments here.
Absolutely. We would be a little lost without them.
Anybody over here? No comments? I would also just like to reiterate how exciting it is to see forward movement. I know it never happens as quickly as maybe people would like. And of course, the pastures that's sad news, but not insurmountable. It just will take time and patience. But it's very exciting. And I just thank all of the people involved. I know this has been a lot of work over decades. And I think the community really appreciates it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. We'll look forward to hearing from you again in August. Next on the agenda is audience participation. So as the clerk's bringing the list up, just please remember when you're recognized to state your name and address for the record. First up is Mr. Johnson.
Jim Johnson, 4575 South Franklin Street, since 2001. Next time I come in this room, I'm wearing warmer clothes. But anyway, I wanted to talk about tree preservation. And I was here last year in May, and subsequently sent an email to Paul regarding some of the clear cutting that's been going on our street. And Katie, we talked about this when you came by during the campaign. And I guess I, first of all, would need an update to see if anything has progressed since the recommendation that I made to Paul to add a paragraph in the section 16.4.230 on tree preservation within rights of way, certainly, and within setbacks. So I don't want to overstep anything if that's already been taken care of, Paul.
So normally in our public comment period, we don't engage in a dialogue per se, but we certainly can take your comment and have staff follow up with you as appropriate. Okay. But if you have other questions, we'd love to hear them. And
well, when I was here in late May of 2022, I brought up the now infamous site at Quincy and Franklin Street. We live on Franklin Street in Old Cherry Hills, and this clear cutting of these sites, and that's not the only one. There's another one at 4949 South Franklin, and there may be others in the village, I don't know. But I don't see any reason why people need to cut down trees within a setback. So, for example, on the corner of Quincy and Franklin there, I think you all know the property, and I've spoken with Fred Wolf about this and others in the neighborhood. There's a 50-foot setback on those two arterials. So if you measure the actual right-of-way, and I actually think one of those big elm trees that was cut down on Quincy was in the actual right-of-way that's owned by the city of Cherry Hills. But within the setbacks, the language that I proposed last year to Paul on the 27th of May was that for all parcels within the village, existing trees within all required setback zones, and now I'd like to add rights of way, shall not be removed nor cut down. An exception of 48 lineal feet parallel to the right-of-way is allowed for vehicular access. So the idea being that if you have a circular drive and it's 24 feet wide, which is 2 lanes, which is too big in my opinion, but nevertheless, allow that to happen. People have to have access to their property. Another exception for severely diseased or dead trees, in the opinion of a licensed or certified arborist, may be removed with special written permission of the city. So that was the language that I proposed 14 months ago. And I would like to see some activity on this from the council because it just takes away from the neighborhood. Shade, as demonstrated these last few weeks, is a valuable commodity. Trees are known to be one of the solutions, or at least stepping in the right direction for climate change. So anyway, since I made my appeal last year, I don't think anything has been done. Since then, some beautiful pine trees on 4949 South Franklin were cut down in the setback. And so that's really the reason that I'm here. There's some other sort of degradation of that whole neighborhood going on with what I call billionaire gentrification. And that is some homes. There's one on the corner of Stanford and Franklin that is just in disrepair. Nobody takes care of it. I think that the Penner family bought that site in conjunction with the site down Stanford. It's probably a fire hazard. It's certainly unsightly. And then also, if you come down Franklin on the east side, there's another home just to the north of the one I'm referencing on Quincy and Franklin, where it looks like a constant big construction site. There's an Army truck there. It's really, not what we sort of imagined as our future on this street 22 years ago when we moved in. So at the last time I spoke, the mayor at the time promised me that something would be done in terms of the language that could then be enforced by, the code. You guys do a great job of code enforcement. Those trucks are around all the time. I think it's easily enforceable. And I think it's reasonable language that doesn't take away anybody's rights to build what they want to build on their land. So that's my request.
Thank you very much. I will assure you that we have actually had some discussions since that time, but I can appreciate that nothing is visible or apparent to you, and so we will have either staff or myself or someone will follow up with you shortly to kind of update you on where we are.
Okay.
So thank you. And thanks for coming and bringing it to our attention again.
Sure.
Ms. Bennis?
My name is Becky Bennis. I have lived at 12 Blackbird Road for 43 years, and I'm one of the neighbors of Quincy Farm. And thank you, your presentation was beautiful. We are very happy, well, I'm not very happy, but we're much happier than we were before because the land preserve is trying to work. But we have some things that we will oppose. I want to show you something, though. Can I approach the... This was created by Walt Stinson, and who lives right by the pond. I speak for the pond. This is one of the things. This is what we're about. I walk almost every day on the Highland Canal. The pond is sick. I walk every day. It is full of algae.
Can I just ask you, we want to record what you're saying for the record, so thank you. Those are lovely photos.
The pond is sick. I speak for the pond. It's full of algae. I talked with Emily this week, and she said that once a month, I think, your Something Solutions comes. It needs to be a priority because it's one of the jewels. Even though it's just an agricultural pond, as you're saying, it's one of the jewels.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and providing your feedback. Next on the agenda is reports from members of city boards and commissions. Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
I was going to remove it.
I did a sec. Oh, you wanted to remove something? Sorry.
Yeah.
Randy, will you withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw the motion.
I'd like to remove move to remove item 7A from the agenda.
Okay. The minutes have been removed from the consent agenda. Councilor Eber.
Let me get to my spot here. Oh, sorry. Page, excuse me. Page 6 of the minutes, about halfway down in unfinished business, Councilor Eber asked if there was an estimate of what the additional cost of construction would be of being forced. I think a better phrasing is if the city were forced to adopt the state's energy code. is a little easier wording. And on page 9, at the end of the page, Councilor Ebert challenged. I think I did use the word challenged, but I think what I was really doing is urging. And then at the end of the second to the last line, it says why the city was part of the solution rather than the problem. I think it would read better if it said potentially allowing others, it would read why the city was part of the solution rather than potentially allowing others to argue the city was unresponsive to the problem of homelessness. With those two amendments, I am fine with the minutes.
Are there any further changes to the minutes? Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes as amended by Rob.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody.
Too many pieces of paper here. Next up is new business. Resolution 29, Series 2023, amending the city's traffic calming policy. Director Goldie.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Before you this evening is Resolution 29, Series 2023, amending the traffic calming policy for the city. Before we get started, though, I would like to point out that the last time we heard this was 2018, and I thought it was a good way to welcome Jim back to a council meeting, since he was one of the
We were just waiting for you, Jim.
Some issues never go away.
Yeah. We would have dealt with this years
Knew how
ago.
important and special this was to you. We thought we'd save it for you.
So just a little review on the goal of the neighborhood traffic calming policy. It's to provide a consistent, context-sensitive, feasible, and manageable procedure for calming traffic for our residents in all of our neighborhoods. So we reviewed this on June 6th of this year in a study session, and these are the 9 issues that I heard from council. And so I thought we'd go over these. A lot of them are more clarifications for council than actual requests to change the policy. So we went and staff did a lot of more research to try to get some good answers so council could understand where we were coming from with the policy. So the first one was, what is the enforcement procedure for traffic complaints in residential areas? Really, the question is increased presence versus increased enforcement. And this is a function of the way our police department truly operates. There's always that discretion for officers. Every stop they make is not the same. There's always circumstances that are different. So we leave that up to the officer's discretion. So again, this is more of an increased presence, an educational thing first, and then enforcement. I know there was some question about that. So we don't have a policy of, okay, if we're doing traffic calming in a neighborhood, it's an automatic ticket, because again, we always have that discretion for our officers. The second question that came up was, how do we prioritize our emergency routes? So the city's snow emergency routes have been defined for many decades. I went back into the 80s, and our maps haven't changed since the 80s. These were never adopted formally by city council. These maps, from everything I can find, was the police department, public works, and fire department working together for years to say, okay, these are the routes that are our priorities so we can get to all neighborhoods when there is an emergency. Whether it's a snow emergency or other emergencies, these are the routes we want to keep clear so we can get those people and responders to those neighborhoods when we can. So the question was, is how are those determined? And I could find nowhere in all my research where the emergency routes were something that city council approved. That was, it's always just the first responders working together. And another question was, why are speed hump installed in pairs or multiples? All the research shows that putting speed humps, speed tables, whatever it is, anything that you drive over in sets is more effective for a longer distance. So that being said, if you put a single hump in, you're only going to get people to slow down before and after that hump. They're going to speed up going to the hump, and they're going to speed up leaving the hump. So hence, those are always put in series to keep vehicles going slower for a longer distance. Why are multiple accidents needed for warrants? Again, for this criteria, we want to make sure that it's not just a one-off. We need to make sure that if we're doing some type of traffic calming, it's for a warranted reason, not just because somebody was a DUI, there was ICE involved, there was health issue involved. So we always want to make sure that where we're doing traffic calming, because traffic calming can cause more issues if it's used wrongly and not warranted. So we always look for multiple accidents. Again, there's always going to be situations where we may say we only need one. If a death was involved or something has changed on the roadway that requires us to do that. But again, we have a professional traffic engineer on our consultant, and the officers always have good say to help us with those when they're issuing those tickets and telling us why those tickets were issued and what all the circumstances were. One thing, we are not suggesting that cut-through traffic is a warrant that we currently use for our traffic calming. City Council may want to add that as one of our warrants. It's from the continued research I did, cut-through traffic is not mitigated very well by speed bumps, speed humps. It will cut the numbers slightly, but most communities that have a cut-through traffic warrant, those warrants are then used to make streets either one-way, dead ends, restricted hours for turning, things that we probably wouldn't do with our residential community. But we can, if with certain situations, look at that cut-through traffic, especially if we have a request for a warranted speed hump or chicanes or bump outs. We need to probably get some pre-numbers on the streets adjacent to wherever we are doing traffic calming to make sure we're not pushing more traffic to other streets. So that's when we would use cut-through warrants to make sure that if we put some speed humps on one street, we're not just moving the problem to the street or two over. And just for your information, the national average for trips from each house is between 8 and 10. And so as we get more numbers, we will try to see if those numbers correlate with what we find here in Cherry Hills when we're doing more traffic counts. The question was asked is, can we use temporary or trial speed humps or any type of traffic calming? There are products out there that are movable. There are communities out there that do move them. I put an example in here, Cordillera in Vail Valley, their main road in the summer, they put 10 or 12 speed humps down the main road. Those are removed in the fall for plowing. So it can happen. Staff feels that this type of program, if we started doing temporary traffic calming, would cause more problems than it would solve. Because the installation and removal is an emotional issue once you put them in. Some people are going to want them forever. Once you take them out, other people never want them to come back. So staff believes it was just cause more discord and discontent towards the city. But if council wanted to try that, we have some numbers. It's about $5,000 per set of speed humps if we were to do speed humps, and even less than that for temporary bump outs and those type of things. A question was asked about movable or pole-mounted speed signs. I think there's some great options here for the city. The chief and I have talked a little bit about this. This is, even before it came up in our traffic calming talks, is something that chief has been looking into to supplement our trailer or speed trailers because these are less intrusive. Staff would recommend that we move forward in 2024 with purchasing a number of these signs and putting them out when we get requests for traffic calming. And we could leave these out longer than we can the trailer type thing. They're solar powered. They're easily moved. There's some options. A lot of our neighborhoods don't have many signs. We have no light posts, but there's some options there that we've found some smaller units that we think this would be a great addition to our program. The question came up about the radar tickets within residential streets. We are working with the city attorney. We still don't have a specific answer yet. There's still some more research to be done, but we will come back to council once we have an answer on that. We don't believe it affects the adoption of the traffic calming policy tonight. And then another question was that why did I only have, I had a limited number of traffic calming devices listed in the last memo for the study session. So I have put together in your packets a number, and again, it's not all inclusive, but it is more inclusive of devices that you drive over and things you drive around. And there's always going to be more that other cities use that we'll see, that our traffic engineer may suggest we use. So there is no limit to what we can do as long as it meets MUTCD and safety standards. So staff's conclusion is that the proposed policy is designed to help determine upfront if traffic calming measures are warranted. Again, this seems to be the hardest part and the most controversial for residents. They don't understand the process. The process isn't easy to understand, and this process is much easier to understand, and everyone can, even though they may not like the outcome, at least they know what the process is before we go into it. It would take the step away of requiring residents just to get 50% of their neighbors together for us to go out and do a traffic study. We're able to do that work in-house now. We think that helps, so we can get out there and do that more for our residents more quickly and at a very low cost. Education and enforcement would be required steps now instead of requested steps. I think that's a big step. All of the programs, the newer programs that I've seen in communities around the United States, education and enforcement are always first, and a majority of the time that will help the residents enough that the permanent traffic calming isn't asked for then. That if we can get out there, we have to be consistent with it and do it more than once maybe, but a lot of the times that will really help our residents and their traffic calming concerns. This new policy, changed policy, encourage residents to be involved, to get to talk to their neighbors. Instead of making the city be the middleman and, talking to somebody, they know who's speeding, but they don't want to confront their neighbor. So this helps with that and neighbors communicating better. Having objectives that are measurable criteria in the policy, staff feels that some of the conflict can be avoided. that often comes with traffic calming. Staff is seeking direction from City Council on the adoption of the new policy. Is there any questions, comments, or directions? I can answer and talk about those right now.
The first question I had is the policy it provided in the packet, both as Exhibit A and Exhibit B, has, one or two red lines, but that's not the extent of the changes to the overall policy, right?
No, those changes were shown in the, and I apologize, those were shown in the study session.
Right.
These were just the changes made from when council saw it at
From
the study session.
Yes, because, yes, okay.
Yes, because the original.
This doesn't look very
No.
different, and in fact, it's a.
Yes. No, the original policy, and I apologize, I should have put that in the packet, was provided for the study session.
Okay,
So yes, it is a big difference.
thank you. Questions, comments? Mayor Pro Tem Wheel.
I would like to, put in a word about the automated monitoring of speed and the potential issuance of tickets. I realize there are legal issues to be addressed and resolved, but I look at the numbers and citations are way down. 893 year to date last year, 381 rather this year. We have had a reduction in injury accidents of 10, going from 44 to 14, but an increase in non-injury accidents going from 71 to 92. Things I read suggest that there's a fairly close relationship between speeding and accidents and traffic problems, and it's concerning to me from a safety perspective that, because I don't think people have slowed down, and I don't think the numbers are saying that we're a lot safer. So if we're not going to stop people because we've changed our patrolling process, then perhaps some other form of enforcement of the speed limits would be good, which kind of brings me back to I'd like to see if we can resolve this and see if there's some traction there, if you will, or possibility for looking at that. I don't have my mind made up. Just want to know, kind of bring it to resolution.
And I would ask the chief to chime in, but when you're looking at traffic accidents and citations, a vast majority, more than 90% of that is on state highways. We're not writing tickets and working accidents on our residential streets, but I'd like the chief to.
Yes, thank you. And just to clarify a couple things to the council members' comment, the philosophy on traffic enforcement hasn't changed at all. And I think it's important to recognize that we currently statistically evaluate number of citations written, but we do not produce statistics on number of traffic stops conducted. And so I think it's important to recognize that those are two different things. The philosophical shift was not around traffic enforcement. It was using a lens around traffic enforcement as a way to reduce crashes, and two, not using it as a performance metric, or i.e. a quota. But the priority has been put on traffic enforcement. In fact, as you probably saw in Friday's report, yesterday, our full-time traffic unit was stood up for the first time in the history of this organization. So traffic enforcement continues to be a priority, in fact, an increased priority. And we're making a hefty investment in 24's budget around these speed signs as a better way to identify real problem areas around speed versus perception. And to Director Goldie's point, the vast majority, and I think it's somewhere in the 80 plus percentile of our traffic crashes occur on both Hamden and Bellevue, which are state roadways, and we have a very limited input on engineering shifts on both of those roadways. However, as you can imagine, that with the creation of a full-time traffic unit, certainly the enforcement will likely increase, not only on the interior roadways, but on those CDOT roadways as well.
Chief, you and I talked about it again this morning on these pole-mounted speed signs. What's the cost on those, Jay? If you can give us a rough estimate if we're to invest in a number of those, because Chief and I talked about what's going on in Bellevue this morning.
Yeah. And, Chief and I have been looking into that. There's some of them as low as $2,500, but those won't give you any data. So starting at about $4,000 a sign, we can use those for the visual to show people what they're doing, as well as for collecting data.
That's good. Now, the other question then is legally, if we were to try and do these where they can actually photograph and get a ticket, are we still waiting for a legal opinion on that? Is that?
Staff and I are waiting to connect on that, but there's some procedural things that we would need to put in place that would ensure the compliance with legal standards. And we're prepared to advise on that.
And just to clarify, those are two different pieces of equipment. The speed sign is the one that kind of flashes the speed in a red and blue light, and at the same time collects data, either in live mode or in blind mode. And then the technology that is being evaluated by our legal counsel is such that would essentially take a photograph of a vehicle as compared to measured speed and issue a citation around the increase in speed. So just to clarify, those are two different pieces of equipment. The ones that we are currently evaluating for next year's budget and we'll be moving forward with to some degree is the speed monitoring and data collection types of signs. And they are $3,700 a piece as of this morning.
Jay, the one we put on Bellevue, that doesn't have the collection data in that one, does it?
Yes, we can collect data with that one. We don't have it turned on because the amount of data that we collect on that state highway is more than we could even, with our limited staff, we don't have time to go through and look at all of that.
That is there. The data is there if we're to look at that.
Yeah. And with if that's the philosophy and council's choice, there's a lot more zeros when we're talking the photo radar with the pictures and that. So those
and you'll have numbers on both those before we do the budget next year, correct?
Yes.
Councilor Sheldon.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wasn't here on the 6th when these 9 questions were posed, but I think they're all worthy questions and good things to be thinking about. Was this, has this been something that maybe I've missed? Has this been something that's been going on with staff or other council for a while that we've been exploring, updating our traffic calming policy? Because other than the 6th, I guess, has it been historically brewing that we've been working on updating it?
That was the joke about Jim. I mean,
well,
I remember working with Jim on it.
But the last time we did it was 06 or something, if I read it right.
Well, that's the last time it was changed. When we brought it in 18, it was killed and
it was
okay.
It just exploded.
I would. I'm not suggesting we explode or implode it at all. I think you've done a nice job on coming up with alternatives and options and really helping to streamline some of the tools in the toolbox for the neighbors to go out and use, and some of the things they can go online and fill out their forms and get things ordered up. I do wonder if does the implementation of the 2 new full-time officers in traffic, does that possibly give us a moment of pause to think about before we change our traffic calming policy? Do we want to see 6 months of data and see, as Randy's, scrubbing these numbers, if the numbers were to come down dramatically without us changing this policy, but because we have 2 new full-time officers out on the streets doing stuff, do we want to change this policy tonight?
I think that the basis for really making this dramatic of a change to the policy is that the current policy is far too subjective. It puts a lot of onus on residents. It ends up pitting residents against each other in a lot of cases, and it's just too subjective. So the impetus in revisiting the traffic calming policy was not necessarily that we thought this revision would perhaps reduce accidents or reduce enforcement. It was that the subjective nature and the process outlined in our current policy that has residents going out and doing all of this work and knocking on doors and getting signatures only to then come back and perhaps have their project not approved was not effective. It was extremely frustrating
Yeah, I
to
get
residents. And so I think that these changes that have been suggested and are proposed tonight are attempting to address those issues with the policy. The enforcement and all of those concerns aren't really part of the changes that are proposed.
Okay, and so I will then.
I mean, would
kind of-
people agree with that? Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that clarification. In the tools in the toolbox slides, Jay, are we suggesting now tonight that if we implement this new policy, that these tools that are in our packet tonight are going to be tools that, and I'm specifically talking about like the chicane, am I saying that right?
Yes.
And the curb extensions, are those something that we're talking about putting in our toolbox as implementing into our Cherry Hill streets right now?
Yeah, we have the curb extensions on Dahlia right now.
I know we do in that, I think in one spot, right?
Yes.
Right at Oxford?
And again, I think these are just options. We don't have to use those. We would want our traffic engineer to have those in the toolbox to use in the right time at the right place.
So you might put any of these, none of these, all of these in the, I mean, these are examples.
Correct. These
only.
are, yes.
Right.
Correct.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
And I think the point, again, of this kind of toolbox is that a lot of times when people get far enough along in their frustration that they approach city council, they've already got their own solution in mind, when maybe that's not the most effective solution for what's happening on that particular street. And so I think the purpose of this toolbox is really just to say, it's more, we're talking, this isn't a speed hump policy. This is a traffic calming policy, and traffic calming means there's lots of things that might be done. It's not just speed humps.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Holen.
Yeah, first of all, good job with it, and I agree with the mayor's comments about exactly why we were doing this. I mean, I think that's exactly it, and I'm in favor of that. One thing that I was curious about, though, not curious about, when we talk about the neighborhood awareness thing, and I think it's on page 3, and it talks about it and things that you can do. There's really nothing in there that talks about specifically and minimum requirements about what they have to do and that they have to report that to us. It just says you got to do it. And then there's some stuff in there that says, hey, a successful campaign is based on reaching 75%. I don't know if that meant they need to come back and say and show and prove that they've done so. But the point is I think it's ambiguous.
Okay.
And I think one of the things we need to do here is get very specific with regard to saying these are the steps that need to be taken, which for the rest of it, I think we are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That one, I think that we're not as much. And then just a general comment, and again, good job overall. You've got all the stuff in there. And this might be just a stylistic thing. If it was me, it bounces back and forth between sort of philosophy and reasons why, and then procedure. And then philosophy and reasons why, and then procedure. I'd write it and just say, hey, here's the philosophy and the education and the reasons why you're going to read what you do. Now it's just going to be boom, 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 and I'm not going to muddy that up with sort of an explanation of why that's there again. That's just me. Maybe nobody else had that same view, but that's just kind of Because I like everything in here. I like it, but that's just what, if it was me, that's what I'd do.
Counselor Eber.
Thank you, Mayor. Number of questions, number of comments, if you would help me through this. When we talked about this last time, there was specific wording in the existing policy about sort of the ultimate piece still being discretion left to council. And at least the way I read, I didn't see that language in here this time.
Yeah.
Am I right?
The ultimate decision is still council's. We tried to set the policy up so the decision is based on financing more than do we want to do this. By the time it comes to council, it has to be warranted that we're going to do this. And council can say, no, we don't want to use speed humps, we want to use chicanes or bump outs, but that also will have already been looked at and designed by a traffic engineer. But council still has the ultimate say of
Right,
yes or
and
no.
and I think that's where I'm going, is that this is a policy, and last time we talked about situations where, notwithstanding the International Traffic Code or
MUTCD.
that notwithstanding that policy, it was still possible for council to deviate from the reliance on use of that. And where we were talking about specifically was whether or not there might be a situation where, notwithstanding any of the numbers, notwithstanding any of the policy things, we might still want to, in a very infrequent basis, say we still want to do something and deviate from our own traffic policy. And Earl just showed me point 5 that I just missed in the document. That still leaves that discretion to council, is the way I guess I'm seeing it. Correct?
I will look at our attorney, but ultimately that is in there, that we left the discretion, but I believe at any time it's a policy. Council can make their decision any way they would like.
Well, and council controls the purse
Yeah,
strings.
correct.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I say, I just have had a number of situations where we may not find it, but there may be something that eventually we just need to do something. And I'm particularly referencing an area in my neighborhood, but that brings up this point. But I understand now. The other question I had is a little bit about the retroactivity. Obviously, I think the policy, once it goes into place, the new one supersedes the old one. But I guess the question is, what happens if we have any applications that are in process? Or do we have any that are in process at this point?
We still do have one on Parkway that is in progress. I've not heard back from those homeowners. It's in their court right now. So that is,
So would it apply? I mean, I'm assuming the old policy applies to that request.
I don't know because I don't know the facts on this situation, but maybe you guys could speak to that.
Yeah, I think anything that's coming forward, we will try to utilize the set of facts established here. Obviously, this hasn't been finalized as a council policy yet, but I think what I'm hearing tonight is there's a lot of good information in here, a lot of good procedures. We will, if anybody moves forward during a time period where this hasn't been adopted, I think we'll try to get them in compliance so that they can actually meet this one and probably the last one as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it would be, maybe the thought would be to sort of acknowledge the work that they have done towards the existing policy, the one that they were functioning under, and maybe finding the appropriate point that they would start at in here. They wouldn't start back at the beginning.
I appreciate that. I think with respect to the application that's in on Parkway, I believe are trying to firm up some of the consistency and justification for making changes would probably doom the existing the application a little bit or make it more difficult. And I don't know that for sure, but I believe it probably.
Yeah, well, the existing application meets none of these warrants, met none of the old warrants. If they wanted to move forward under the old policy, they would have to pay for it, and city council would have to approve it.
Okay.
And that's the element where I don't want to presume what city council would have done, but it is exactly that kind of, we're doing it for this person, but not for that person, and that
I agree.
we would like to avoid.
Right, I agree. Moving on, I guess one of the questions that I had was the new policy puts a great deal of the educational obligation on the property applicant or applicants. I've had a number of residents tell me that they are very uncomfortable having to confront their neighbors. And I've had a number of residents tell me that it's really their job to point out to us that there's a problem, and it's government's job then to go out and, conduct the educational policy and trying to implement so that when I turn around and go to Earl, who happens to be my next door neighbor, you son of a gun, it's really all my friends and family and residents and neighbors who are doing this. And then he gets offended and says, "Are you calling me a speeder?" And, that type of thing that is difficult for neighbors to engage amongst all the other difficulties that go on between neighbors. They think that that policy program would be better left as educational pamphlets that come from the city to the affected area. That's number one. Number two, the idea of direct and indirect impact areas is a little unclear because I got a lot of comment back that many people are still saying, so you're going to close over or do something over here and it's going to impact over there. And yet I'm not immediately included in those early educational process. And it was difficult for people to understand that it's not as broad as possible at the beginning versus the directly impacted, I guess I'd say. It was too limiting, was the comment that I got back. And that was on page 7, step 3 of the process. I do think this would be a good additional topic for a crier article regarding the policy. And also, I'll speak for my neighborhood again. I am one of those few streets that is a dirt road street. All 3 or 4 accidents that I know of in the last 2 years have all been caused by non-resident drivers going too fast. So while I think this is very good within the context of Cherry Hills Village, I do think we still need to do something that gets the word out to our surrounding community neighbors. And I'm not sure if an article in the Villager is appropriate, that we submit letters of editor to the Villager that wants to alert our fellow community members to this traffic policy and that we take speeds in Cherry Hills seriously. Signed members of City Council might be a good way to do something like that. And finally, when Chief first came on and I first met him, I talked with him a little bit about the concept of amending our our nuisance ordinance to include speeding vehicles as a potential nuisance. And that, from my understanding of what other communities have done, is that the vehicle itself is the nuisance, not the driver, so that you can then take action against the vehicle, not having to identify that it was a particular person driving the car. And one of the potential options is that to abate the nuisance, you can take away the nuisance causer, you can take away the car. So when a kid is out driving dad's new car, or that dad gave kid, you can take the car away for up to a period of time. I think it was a year in our VADA's ordinance. There's a number, I mention it because it's another tool, it's an extreme tool, but given that we were talking about extreme issues going on in the village and we don't want somebody to be killed, Is it a tool for the village toolbox? Chief and I have discussed this a little bit. There are a number of other issues that come about with the difficulties of enforcing this kind of a nuisance, and I don't want to speak for you, Chief, but we kind of tabled it for then, but I do think it's an important concept that I want to make clear to the residents of Cherry Hills Village that we all take nuisance driving speeds seriously, and we are very concerned about the safety and protecting the safety of our residents, which could include something as drastic as that. And, you know, if it goes forward in my discussions with Chief, maybe I'll bring it up as one of the other points of discussion later. But I think with that said, I'll close on the traffic policy.
And let me just comment on that, because I do think it's interesting, and I took note of your comment that neighbors are not comfortable talking with other neighbors. Interesting. Hey, let's make sure we all know and we all take seriously the fact that nuisance driving is something that we're all concerned about. We just don't want to have to talk to our neighbors about it. And I'm just saying this just in general. One of the things, and this is just my philosophy, you know, conservative governments is Fed pushing it down to the state, state down to the local, and to the extent local can, pushing it down to the HOAs and our neighbors. That's something that I believe in. That is what we're supposed to do. Okay, as citizens, and we're moving away from that more and more towards when we don't want to talk to anybody, and we want government to take care of things for us. I believe in that very strongly, that at the end of the day, we all have an individual, not we elected officials, we as residents have an obligation to make our neighborhoods, our streets, the kind of streets that we want to live in by talking to our neighbors. And I feel very strongly about that. No one else has to, but this is a problem that is causing more and more of our division. We don't want to talk about anything substantive. We want somebody else to take care of it for us. It's a problem. And that's just my personal view. And so I support wholeheartedly the thing that says, hey, you have to try to talk to your people in your neighborhood where it's happening first. And there's an education process that goes on before we could take any of these other more drastic measures. And I just believe in that very strongly, and I just wanted to say that.
Well, and I'll piggyback on that. I think somewhere in the middle, I am inclined to agree with you, Earl, and I feel the same way. However, I do think it might be asking a lot of an average layperson to educate his or her neighbors about something that he or she may not be that much of an expert on. And that's why I actually found this Exhibit G, with the exception of the typos. I think we really should do something like this, that when people come and they're ready to embark on this process, and now they're being tasked with helping to educate their neighbors, we can hand them a stack of these and say, here are some materials you can use. We can maybe offer to attend that meeting to provide some more information if they need to, but, you know, walk around, put these on your neighbor's doors or whatever that might be. The other thing that I thought was very interesting in here that has never come up in our discussion was step 3 in their traffic calming phases, which is increased fines. If a street remains in noncompliance after selective enforcement, 75% of the affected area residents must sign a petition agreeing to an increased minimum fine of $200 for speeding. That's an interesting thought. And, you know, maybe we should think about that. So I do think we should create something like this. And I don't know. I think we should talk to Chief about.
Yeah. And I think we can have a number of those, some brochures, yard signs that we can provide. So I think
materials to assist.
Yes, we can put a whole program together.
I think that's really what I was shooting for, is maybe some facilities that people could drop off instead of having to say, hi, Mrs. Jones, I'm Robert Eber, and I want to tell you why I think speeds are too fast in the neighborhood. You know, the city is requiring me as part of this process to give these materials out and do some education. Here's 5 documents or something like that. It still puts the onus, as Earl is trying to say, on the person, but at least gives them some materials that they can say, I'm just giving out some materials that the city's kind of encouraging me, and I'm not here to get in your face.
And I also agree that this would make this a good article in the Crier. Just generally, speeding is an issue, maybe not as focused on the traffic calming policy, but we recognize there are citywide speeding issues, and here are some of the things that council, is doing. And in particular, I think the stop sign frequently asked questions. I mean, I think these are the questions that are going to come up. I think a document like this should be available, and perhaps some of this, maybe not its entirety, but some of it could be included in a Crier article about why it's not just as simple as throwing stop signs up on every intersection. Any other comments about traffic calming? All right. Do we feel that, is there enough consensus on this policy to adopt it tonight? Do people want to see any further changes? What is the pleasure of council?
Well, I think I said, and again, if there was no agreement amongst, and I'd vote to do this then if everybody wanted to do that. If it was me, I'd go back and make that change that I was suggesting, which is to kind of shove all the philosophy and education and reasons why, and then make which is kind of like that green thing, which is going, okay, now, boom, 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 boom. Again, that's just me. If the rest of council didn't feel that was necessary, then like I say, what's the substance, the sum and substance of what's in here, I agree with wholeheartedly. It was a good job.
Yes.
I agree with Earl, and maybe it would be better to see the draft of what might be a final, rather than approve this and then maybe we go through some recycling.
Okay.
Make it a little clearer, at least my perspective.
Are people in agreement with that?
I have no objection to spending another 2 or 4 weeks getting it right, if that's what we feel like.
Same
it is.
here. Okay, I think we heard well from the council tonight. Thank you for your input. What we will do is go back and do some rearranging, some formatting, and make things a little easier to follow. I think there's a couple of points that were brought up that we need to clarify within the policy itself, and then we'll bring that back to council. This is one of those things I don't want to have Chris take up when he comes back.
When he comes back. Although that'd be here, Chris.
I just want to also mention just one thing, that in terms of the traffic calming policy, well, we talked a lot about our neighbors, and I think this traffic calming policy would be a great document that is required reading, or a handout at least, as part of every building permit, and ask the applicant to distribute it to every tradesperson working on a project, because those guys fly through our neighborhoods. The Amazon, UPS people, they fly through our neighborhoods. I would like the word, again, it's this publicity push, to almost say to the Amazons and the UPS, if you're going to do business in Cherry Hills, you're going to know and agree to follow our traffic calming policy.
Well, that's why I like that increased fine thing.
Yeah.
But something
I
like
think
that.
Maybe a separate flyer, so we don't.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea to give all the trades that, the UPS guy, because that I see them, they're driving a little faster than they should be to get their routes done. So yeah, that's another one where we can. That's where we can do another one of those flyers that's informational.
Yeah.
Code's out on those construction sites all the time. We can get them that information.
And
I think, Katie, you got a great idea. I think we can increase our fines. If we're going to look at that, I'd like to look at the increased fines for those too, especially in residential areas.
Okay.
I mean, that's a great motivation not to speed.
You add that to the list then. All right. So I guess we no need to continue this because there's no motion on the table. So we will just move on. There's been a request perhaps for a personal break. So we will recess for 5 minutes if that works for everyone until 8:28.
Can I please get a picture of you guys with your Quincy Farm hats on?
Oh.
Sure.
Dad, you want us down in front?
Oh, wait, there's somebody else.
Yes, there's no expectation of action.
Yeah, down here.
Go down there, okay.
Sorry to throw that issue back on the table.
That's just to get it to the screen. That's not power.
I can't see whose eyes are open and closed. Thank you. Well, that's right, just take a bunch, because I won't know until I see them later. Oh.
This is on Friday the 15th. And it's Sunday. Oh, because, yeah. Come this weekend, because on Sunday night, the New York Philharmonic. So come with me. I'm with Galante. I'll bring your portable. Once we took possession of it.
Yeah, because they got their shirt to make sure they can get it back to you.
No. Only select.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that.
I'm cheap, I'm talking about you and cheap, sorry. Talk away. We were talking about this activity. When I call it. Yeah, but well, you're right. Yeah.
I don't think I ever guessed that. Sadly, they're kind of like, this is great.
All right, let's come back to order, please, so we can keep things moving. We're still waiting on Al. Yes. Yes, but I'm still waiting for Al. We'll give him a few extra seconds. All right, we are moving on to item 10B, the Cherry Hills Village Art Commission vacancy. Clerk Gillespie.
Good evening, Mayor Brown, members of City Council. We have a vacancy on the Art Commission, and we are looking for 2 council members to review the applications, conduct the interviews, and make a recommendation. The vacancy was advertised in the July issue of the Crier with a deadline at the end of July, so we'll be looking to do that next month.
We have one volunteer, Mayor Pro Tem Wheel. Do we have another volunteer? And Councilor Eber.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Resolution 30, Series 2023, accepting a donation from the Cherry Creek School District on behalf of the Cherry Hills Village Police Department. Chief Lyons.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. In front of you this evening is a resolution to accept a donation from the Cherry Creek School District to the Cherry Hills Village Police Department. It is my understanding that each year, at least for the last several years, at the end of the school year, the district provides a donation of various amounts. This year happens to be $10,000 as a thank you for the service we provide the elementary school in terms of our presence there as a school resource officer. It should be noted that we have no contractual obligation with the school district, nor does any other elementary school in the district for such presence. We make no promises of that service, and they make no promises of compensation or a donation. However, historically, over the last several years, they've been able to do that. My understanding is that this donation has been accepted every year, although not by resolution, so this may be the first time you've seen that. Certainly a $10,000 donation would go a long way in terms of our equipment needs. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilor Eber? No? Yep.
My only question was whether or not there were any minutes of the school district acting upon this, and that we could just attach that as rationale again for why this is coming to us, to make sure that there's no appearance of any expectation for the gift.
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not aware of any minutes, Chief. Okay.
I'm not aware of any either. This conversation, in fact, I asked for a personal meeting just so I had a historical perspective of what this donation was or wasn't, and that was with their security director. I am not aware of any legislative decisions made by the board on this issue.
Yeah. I think given the absence of any.
I thought that would be.
I would say probably the approval of their budget, as it was probably in their budget, is our best guess as to where that would have been approved by the board.
And it is from the district, not from the elementary school.
And not from the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Do I hear a motion?
Okay. I move to approve Resolution 30, Series 2023, accepting a donation from the Cherry Creek School District on behalf of Cherry Hills Village Police Department.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much to the Cherry
And
Creek School
I note
District.
that the with gratitude was included, so thank you very much for putting that in there.
Yes. Recommended public engagement for utilizing American Rescue Plan Act grant funds. Director Farman.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight's discussion is to review a staff-recommended process to garner some resident input on the remaining American Rescue Plan Act funds. And those are required to be obligated or committed to a project by the city by the end of 2024 and then spent by the end of 2026. Just as some background for the U.S. Treasury grant funds, the city was provided $1.67 million, and there were 2 projects that programs that those funds have been spent on, leaving a remaining balance of $1.3 million. And the U.S. Treasury guidance requires these funds to be spent on general government services. So that's pretty wide open. I guess the best way to define that is generally the services that are traditionally provided by the recipient government would be considered government services unless the Treasury has stated otherwise. So that leaves the whole gamut of different projects. The city would like to obtain some citizen input for spending these remaining funds, and we do have a recommended timeline to get this public engagement. We would be advertising for a community survey in August, and then opening an online survey for 3 weeks in September, along with an open house in September on September 5th. Those results would be proposed to be discussed on October 3rd as part of the 2024 proposed budget discussion. And then projects and funding could be decided at that point for the proposed budget, or we would also have that as part of the City Council retreat in February, where we would recommend a more comprehensive strategic approach to discuss capital project funding as well as available funds for 2024 and also for the 5-year capital improvement program. So that's the recommended timeline. And then we do have some projects that have been identified through the capital improvement program as well as master plan survey results or council initiatives. So these are the listed programs that would be in the survey, and then the citizens would also be able to add additional projects for council consideration.
Can I just ask a quick, I don't know that most people know what a street design complete street project is. So if that's going to be on a survey, something a little more.
Probably give some examples there. Yeah. Good.
One question I've got, have we got an answer that we can consider cellular service as part of a general government service? Do we have an answer on that yet? Because I know that was a question. It is eligible? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I guess I've got a question, maybe, and this will be maybe a little controversial. I'm not certain why we would go to the public with this and do this survey. We've just completed the master plan where we talked about a number of these topics and gotten input in less than a year with regard to what the public would like to see done in terms of services, what they're willing to pay for, what they're not willing to pay for. And I view it as then the council's job is to make a determination as to where best to spend their funds. What really is the difference between these ARPA funds and where we spend them and any funds that are in the general fund at that point in time? And so I sit back and I go, not that I'm against getting input. I mean, I'm always for it, but I mean, we went at length on the master plan to do that and got a lot of input on a lot of these particular topics. And now we're going, well, we want to do it again. And then, quite frankly, why wouldn't we do it when we do the budget? I mean, what is the difference between these funds and any of the funds that we take in that are part of our resources?
Well, I think one answer to that is that these funds are restricted in some way. So these funds cannot be used for a lot of the things identified in our master plan. They probably could be used for some of the things identified in the master plan. So,
well, such as the ones listed here?
Yes, such as the ones listed here.
Right, which are the major projects that were talked about, although I don't remember the street design, complete street project thing being in there. But the rest of them all were part of the master plan discussions.
I think that I do believe that the concept of taking this out for public input was really just that, in an effort to provide an enormous amount of transparency and opportunity for input. The question, I think the master plan even still struggled with, we want this, but we don't want to pay for it. we want this, we don't want to raise our taxes to pay for it, but if the city had money, we might want to spend it on that. I think that there were a lot of those questions, at least for me, that were still unresolved in the master plan. And so this would be an opportunity, just yet another opportunity to get a little more clarification. Okay, we do have a little bit of money to spend. But to your point, I worry a little bit that, $1.3 million isn't going to make a dent in some of these projects.
No, it's not. And the other thing is that, again, not that, and I'm for everything that you said, which is why when I sat on the Planning and Zoning Commission as well as the Citizens Advisory Task Force, I was one of the ones that pushed hard to get citizen input and to really get specific on those questions. So I'm always in favor of that, never against it. But once you kind of do this and you sit there, okay, what are we going to do when we've got a little disparate group and somebody wants to, they want to do this thing or that thing, and we get that. And that's the input we get. And we're sitting here, and that's the input and the people that showed up. Okay, and what are we going to do, ignore them? I mean, we basically said we want to go out and get that input, which I think we've already gotten, that then we have, then as the learned body, have to weigh and make determinations in the best interests of the village overall, as opposed to, well, now we're going to go again, and yeah, we're not bound by what comes, but then, well, why did you do it?
Okay, I'd like to see us, I actually would like to go out to the public and ask the question, and I'd like to do it in a little different way than the master plan. I think that part of the dilemma we face is some of these projects are huge investments, some of them are not huge investments, and I think if you went to the public and you said, okay, here are 6 projects, here are the price tags, they'll give you a little description about it, right? And here are the price tags with each of those. Now, you've got $1.3 million. Why don't you allocate that? I start getting a much more meaningful piece of input and feedback. And I think the decisions and the input that the residents make, they're provided more information to be more thoughtful about their response. It's easy to say, I want cellular, broadband, and, if $1 million is 5% of the improvement and it may not affect me, then maybe I don't want to spend it there. If I can spend it on, other topics, and maybe I take care of that problem forever, I might want to spend it that way. And I think without the cost and without the input on priorities, it could become a little more vague input, where if we're going to go out, I think I'd like to see us get informed, specific input. And maybe it's not just open houses and things like that. Maybe it's a survey. Reach out as broad as we can.
If I could kind of interject in here, I might be a little late to the dance, but I don't mind leading. So what I tend to, if I had my priorities, I've got my priorities, what they would be already. They're probably a lot different than some people out there. And I'm sure as staff, we can prioritize these in an efficient manner that I think we could best use these ARPA funds. Now, if we're looking to gather data, just to get data about what are the priorities, is it more cell as to undergrounding utilities and just getting data as to what's maybe important to the public? That might be a different question than to how best to use our ARPA funds. And if that's the case, I think from my standpoint, I think the Highline Canal stormwater improvements are very important to get accomplished. I think some of our sanitary sewer upgrades need to be completed. And I think even the EV charging stations are important. And certainly we might be able to accomplish some of those, if not all of those, with the money we have. But some of these others, they could be $60 million, $80 million. And certainly, even though they're a high priority, how do you fund those? And certainly that won't resolve how to use the ARPA funds. So I'm happy to take direction from the council, whether you want to, have staff prioritize and then budget these for next year, or whether we want to go to the public and have the public prioritize the budget for these ARPA funds. Either way, we're okay handling. Just looking for direction.
I mean, I think, to that point, all of these things are in the master plan, but I don't think that I think all of those things were elevated in the master plan, and there isn't a clear, we want to do this one now versus that one now.
See, I
But to your
disagree with
point,
that.
maybe-
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think that there is, and again, it could be a lot of money, but I mean, and I don't know because the study's being done. But there's no question that of these lists on here, that the public through the master plan, improving cellular phone, that was number one. That is at the top of the freaking list. Now, can we go build an underground fiber optic, blah, blah, blah? No. But I am, and I'm way out of bounds here. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I sit back and I go, my sense is we're going to do something. We're going to improve this cellular service some aspect. Will it be as much as we want? I hope so. But if it's not what we want, are we going to do something? My sense is we are. I mean, we're not going to ignore this problem that everybody has been saying forever. Now, that's just my view. And again, maybe the study will come back and it'll say, look, you either spend $25 million or you don't spend a dime. But I don't believe that's what it's going to say.
But I think it's still hard for us, at least it's hard for me, to make a decision without a price tag. And that's kind of where I was struggling with, personally struggling with how do I prioritize the list of things in the master plan that we want to accomplish. Some, they're knock it down for 10 points, and others are massive. And I think we may not have asked the question in the way that helped us prioritize. And so among these and maybe others that people add, having that price tag and that financial impact seems to me to be a material issue.
But part of the problem is we don't know price tag of many of them, not just the cellular. I think we know the Highline stormwater is, I think, $600,000-$700,000. The one piece that we need to improve that's like a life safety issue for us in the city. I think that's something we need to get going and get it on the budget soon. Am I right? Yeah.
That's which one, Dan?
The Highline Canal.
Stormwater.
Yeah, that's the overflow at Blackmer. It's about 200,000 just for that one. 600 was all of them.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, but I'm listening to both of you make your arguments about maybe no survey versus more detailed survey. I couldn't agree more with both of you. I think you make a very valid point, Earl. We've asked the question of our citizens. They've spoken on it. But if we do go back to our citizens with this survey, I think it needs to be really very detailed and as much detail as we can provide, and say, if you choose this, then you're going to be foregoing that. And I don't know that that's really feasible either, because we have so many holes in this that we don't know. Unless we're talking about kicking the can out months before we do this survey, which maybe that's the answer. No, because it can't be, because don't we have to identify by 24?
Right.
Identify it by the end of 24.
End
yes.
of 24.
Yeah.
So there is a little time to identify, and then we have a relatively short window to go deploy those funds.
I'm even if it's not, an exhaustive study down to the penny, I think we've got some orders of magnitude numbers for some of these. And I'm not picking on cellular. It's just the first one on the list, So, and I think it becomes a bit of a Christmas wish list if you don't have a price tag on it. Yeah, I want all of that stuff. But if you don't know what it costs, it's pretty hard to prioritize and say, okay, now that I understand the prices, these are the ones that are most important. These are the ones I can afford and are important to me. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with what I would see the value in going to the public. If we're just going to ask, do you like cell phones? Yeah, it's like not a salute the flag thing. Meaningful, at least here's the order of magnitude for the whole project. And if you had $1.3 million, how would you allocate it?
Okay, but now for me, to put myself in Earl's shoes, that $1.3 million isn't going to do the cellular project.
I know.
But it certainly could be part of it, right? I mean, that's going to be a big project, and it could be $1.3 million from here and a couple million from some other. The average person isn't going to know that. And I just don't know, without an enormous amount of education and explanation, I don't know how valid that data will be in the end.
Well, let me try it a little differently. And this is not a hard number at all. But, at one time I'd heard, well, if we wanted to underground the utility lines, it could be as much as $50 million. If you compare the $1.3 million to the $50 million, it's like, I'm not going to make a whole lot of progress against this objective if that's the right number. Assume it's the right number for these purposes. But on the other hand, I might be able to take care of, pick one, some sanitary sewer upgrades or something like that, which is not particularly sexy topic. but
I don't think anybody's going to choose that one.
But it's like the difference between being able to knock something out or just kind of scratching at the surface, and that's what I think I feel like I'm missing in the process of prioritizing. Again, I'm willing to go with the majority. I don't want to be redundant and repeat myself.
Katie,
Councilor Blum? Yep. Oh, yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I tend to agree, and I hate to say it, but I agree with Earl on this thing. But it seems to me, if you look at these projects, we're empowered to do certain things on behalf of our residents. By giving them a list of things, it's going to be all over the board. Somebody may say, I don't have cellular service, that's got to be it. And we can't, to educate them and say, well, we can spend $1.3 million or whatever, it's not going to do anything for you. Or somebody may say, I believe in electric vehicles and I want charging stations on every corner. I don't think we gain anything by doing the survey out to the residents. I think we've got enough feedback. We know what the master plan says, that we should make our decisions ourselves. We can set the priorities. We're the ones that is going to have the knowledge as to basically over the course of the next 18 months or whatever it is, it's going to cost Highline Canal. Somebody may say, well, that's not important to me, but it's important that we do get it done, and it's going to have to spend the money for it. So I think I agree with Earl that to do this and go through the whole process and open house and everything, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's important to have the communication with our residents, and we can do that individually without going through this long, convoluted process.
What about something like this then? What if rather than having a whole enormous, open houses and surveys, et cetera, what if we just have a series of study sessions, perhaps more than one? Maybe they're on council night. Maybe one is on a council night and one is not. One is on some other night. And we publicize that so that people can come listen to the deliberation, listen to the trade-offs that you're all confronted with. Yes, we know this is important, but this isn't enough money to make real progress. So whatever that discussion might be, I think that's the valuable part. Our residents are smart people. If they hear those deliberations and then invite them to provide public comment before making that decision.
I can go for that.
I guess where I'm coming from on this is We've got $1 million plus, which is not a ton of money, but it's not an insignificant amount of money. I do believe that we've been elected to figure out the city's priorities and to implement them. What I'm really looking for in any outreach program here is really whether or not somebody has an idea that none of us have thought about or could be added into, if not ARPA money use, maybe it's a good project for later on. One of my pet issues that I've known about it for a long time, but never really thought about until much more recently is, maybe we need to do an actual survey of our rights of way in certain parts of the city so we can fill in that void to help Public Works know some of the uncertainties that they don't know. Probably can't do it for $1 million, but maybe you do a couple of blocks that have always been a question. I'm looking for somebody to be able to tell me an issue that I've never thought about that maybe is a one-time hit using. So I would phrase this as an outreach program looking for suggestions. Some suggestions are taken, many are not.
Okay, to play devil's advocate with that though, don't you then run the risk of really just identifying pet projects as opposed to what has been identified in the master plan as of interest to a lot of people?
I think they fall within the master plan. Sorry to interrupt. I think they still fall within one of the goals within the master plan. Increasing city efficiencies might be the guise for the right-of-way study. Many of the master plan things in the new section on sustainability were about starting on the education side. But we didn't say we wanted to do project A, B, C, and D. We just came up with education and then implementation to follow. Maybe some of those meat on the bone, if somebody said, do this kind of education on sustainability, it might be worth it. I'm not saying that it is, but those type of things fall into our lap. We already know these 6 things, I personally, or 7 things that's listed here. I don't think undergrounding is frankly ever going to be one now that we've seen residents willing to do it on their own and form special districts. I don't think that would ever get a city priority.
I don't know, if you specifically said underground from Holly to University, we could probably do that for $1.3 million. I mean, that's about what we spent from.
My point is
no, it was a lot
We
more.
spent $1.3 million on the half mile
Right.
from.
But I guess the thing here is that
We can't get all the way down to University.
I don't think we want to utilize the fact that we have these ARPA funds to generate new projects. I mean, we're always looking for it. Anytime our citizens want to come in.
I agree.
Anytime, that's what we want to do. These are the projects, and at the end of the day, I mean, this is just my opinion, and that's what we're doing, sharing, is that we know that cellular is a big deal. We know that's a big deal, and we know that the stormwater in the Highline Canal, that's a big deal. And the other one, which we can't use ARPA funds for, but it's a big deal, is Quincy Farms.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to be honest with you, the rest of this stuff at the end of the day, it's like going, okay, if we have the dough and it's a little extra and we want to start pushing that along, at the end of the day, that's the stuff that we got to get done. It's not unlike when I got on council the first time. I mean, there's other things to do. All of a sudden, it's like going, we got a city hall we need to build, we got public works we need to move, and we need to move Mead Park. And there's other stuff that needs to be done, but that's it. Let's go. I mean, and that's how I see this at the end of the day. Now, I am sympathetic. It's how we all probably do our personal, at least I do, which is, I probably should do this over here, but it really doesn't make a dent. And if I do this over here, I can tell my family, look what I got done over here.
There you go.
I mean, but I don't, but that's what I do personally. And I know intellectually that's crap. And we need to, we know where our priorities are. We know where our significant projects are. We were given a gift, as all cities were at this point in time, to be able to utilize it. There are certain projects that are on that capital list that we can use it for. There's certain ones that we can't. And let's just get down and start going down the process as a council deciding where are we going to spend that money. And as both, I think the mayor and Councilor Sheldon said, and maybe some others, we don't even have the dollars on that. The one we do know is the stormwater improvements, which is one that we have. The cellular we haven't gotten yet.
Incidentally, I've got some feedback that I can maybe provide. Well, two thoughts. Number one, since the Crier article went out about cellular, my email and phone has been blowing up in a good way. lots of people calling, supporting the plan. Let's go fix our cellular. They don't know how we're going to fund it. We know a little bit more than they know right now, but not a lot, right? The other thought I will throw out there about cellular right now, I think what we're going to find that comes out of this, and I don't know this for sure, but I think we're going to find that for every dollar we can put towards that plan, we're going to be able to leverage that dollar with partnership dollars or rent, if you will, from the carriers or whatever that leveraging source may be. So just before we all say that, you know, it's going to be a $20 million number or 50 million or 10 or we don't know what the number is yet to go solve our cellular out there. I think there's going to be a significant leveraging opportunity where if we had $1 million plus the sale of some real estate money plus other sources, property tax revenues coming up, whatever it may be, we actually might be able to go finance or fund the entire operation. Don't know what that looks like yet, but that's my gut being somewhat close, maybe as close to the topic as anyone up here.
And that's exactly what leads me to say that the average person won't know about the different possible funding sources. And so I think, I guess I'm starting to think of this more like our general budgeting process. We always hold the budget process during public meetings. We always we have public hearings. We have maybe not a public hearing on this, but maybe we should treat it, because it's budgeting some new funds, and maybe and we should really publicize those meetings where we're going to be discussing that, and then include public comment periods specifically about, and maybe we call that a public hearing, I don't know, but so we can discuss first and then let the public make comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree 100%. That method would solve the problem of getting input and not having, you know, potentially chaos or opinions or an explosion of new projects. That feels good. But I think when we go through each one of these things and we review it, I personally want to see at least some order of magnitude of what we're talking about. I don't want to do the Christmas wish list thing, because all of these things are great, you know, great, let's do them all. But
if I could interject.
It's a finite amount of funds. We're talking about prioritization, and that to me takes information that's not just the what, but the how much to do it well.
But we're not going to get that from the citizens. I think I like
No.
Katie's idea.
I'm already
opening
in
it up.
I'm figuring somebody's going to do a presentation to us.
Of course, we have
that's
to
going to
set it
go through this, not a citizen. I mean, some
Yeah.
staff, you know. And as we go through these things, and I'm 100% cool with invite the public, see the deliberations, participate if you want. That all works well. I just want to be sure we get the dollars associated with at least a rough order of magnitude, if not.
Mr. Thorson.
Thank you. Well, one of the things you pay me for is my recommendation. So I'm going to provide my recommendation. Maybe it'll help give a little bit of direction, maybe not. But there's certain things on here we're going to have to do regardless. The sanitary sewer upgrades, they're going to have to be funded, and it's either coming from general fund or from sanitary sewer district funds or from ARPA funds. The Highline Canal, we're going to have to do. I mean, these are things that are really, we're going to have to do. So my recommendation is that staff bring back as part of the budgetary process, utilizing the ARPA funds to do the things that we know we're going to do. You still reserve your general fund potentially to do a cellular or some other project when we know a little more. My concern is that we may not know what we're doing before the end of the year when it comes to cellular. And I would hate to spend money on a cellular project that provides no benefit, and then we still have to do these other projects with general fund or some sort. So I think it would be best, and my recommendation is that when we come forward, and we're just starting the budget process now, we know pretty much what the Highline Canal is going to cost. We pretty much know what maybe the sanitary sewer costs are going to be. We could include EV charging stations and knock out these projects with ARPA funds. That still reserves our general fund to do all these other things, and it gives us some flexibility on when and how. But ARPA is a little more restrictive, and we probably need to move forward sometime in the near future. And these surveys, I'm a little concerned that we may not leave ourselves enough time to really evaluate these properly. So that would be my recommendation.
Councilor Sheldon.
One other idea that I almost don't want to bring up, but I think it might make some sense to do is 3 weeks from now, we may have a transaction closing in the city. Knocking on wood. If that's the case, when that's the case, if we were to go down this road of having some open houses or study sessions or whatever format they come in, do we want to also ask our citizens about those monies as well? I know these are restricted. The ARPA 1.3 is restricted to infrastructure-related stuff. The others will not from the real estate sale, but if we're going to ask the citizens the questions, I feel like we'll be having the same conversation a month from now about what are we going to do with this money, and do we have to ask our citizens?
Again, and I don't think that we do, okay? You guys go back into history a little bit here.
Earl, but we just stipulate a minute ago that this is a solution, a compromise, if you will, that the mayor brought up that we all would be okay with? Did you not agree with that?
Yeah, in terms of the budgeting process with an open, I think we should be doing that anyway. I thought it was a great idea to try to get, but you're looking at it at the time. Information comes. Like, for instance, if all of a sudden we got the Highline stormwater improvements and it's available, we're not going to sit there and go, yeah, but we got 3-4 more months before broadband comes in, so let's wait. No, we're not going to do that. At least I don't think we should do that. We're presented with something that needs to be acted on at that point in time, and we're going to sit there and they're going to say, hey, utilize these funds for that purpose. And we're going to continue to go down the road each time with all of these funds and evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. It's not a, let's use this for this. I agree. I mean, we know that the ARPA funds can only be utilized for certain things. And the thing that would suck is if there weren't any and nothing was going to come, and then we'd be going, well, what do we do with these funds here at the end of the day? We aren't going to have that. We know we're going to have projects that are presented to us, and we're not, I can't imagine that we'd be sitting there going, but for the ARPA funds, we wouldn't do this project. That's not what it's going to be. It's like, no, we have to do this project, and we've got the ARPA funds, that let's obligate those in that direction and go forward. And it'll be the same thing with the $4 million, knock on Formica, that comes rolling in the door. But that's no different than additional monies that come in from sales tax revenue or anything else. We're going to sit back and evaluate them and say, what is the best use of these funds for the best interest of the village? And if at any point in time we decide that we are operating too blind, we don't know what our citizens want, of course we're going to go out and get more information, which is different than saying, let's go get information, because I very rarely hear anybody up here say, we don't think we know what our citizens in Cherry Hills want.
See, I don't think we have to jump right on what happens with this $3 or $4 million, like you guys said. But I do think that as we learn more about the cellular, I think your article really stimulated some things. We may know sometime in the next year or next 18 months, hey, we can get this done. Where the source is going to be, one of them may be the sale of the real estate. Some of it could be this. But I think as we learn these projects going along, then as a wise council that we've been empowered to do this, we make those decisions at that time. So I think Katie, the route you're going down, I think is where we do it. And as these things come available and we learn more, we address it at that point.
Well, but didn't we just hear from city manager that he's concerned that may take too long to go through those public processes?
I guess what I heard is that in the meeting would start with a presentation from staff with staff's recommended prioritization and rationale behind that. And I think city manager gave us a little insight into what that would be, in that it would be the things that we know we have to do. It's not if we have enough money, we'd like to do this. It's we really have to do these things, and here are some funds we can use. I guess the question that remains, and I do think we should have public input as part of that meeting, looking at the timing and where we are in the year, and considering that the general budgeting process is coming up. The question then that comes to my mind is, to Earl's point, is this just part of that budget process and the hearings that we do on the budget? Or do we want to have a separate kind of deliberative session specifically about the ARPA funds and public hearings specifically about that? Or do we just want to do it all as the budget process?
Let's roll it all up into one.
Roll it all up into
one. But, I mean, there may be, an enhanced budget process or more.
Right, it'll be maybe a different.
It's still called the budget process, though.
There's another section on the agenda.
Let's let city manager do his job to give to us the options for the first thing. I think that's the question of what we do with ARPA money right now, is what I guess I'm hearing is your consensus.
Yeah. Okay, what we got?
And then later on do a big budget, and if it's robust, that's great.
Okay, and Laura, I will have to make some revisions to send to you. I'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so we will, thank you for putting this suggestion together, but I believe that the consensus is that we will address the use of and prioritization of the ARPA funds as part of the budgeting process, which is coming up anyway.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to reports, I'll keep my comments brief. As you know, Senate Bill 213 didn't pass, is definitely coming back in some form. The city has budgeted for this year to retain the services of a consultant, a lobbyist again. So that is included in our budget this year. And I just wanted to say that I was approached this week by the mayor of Greenwood Village, who, as you know, we partnered with last year, or I guess this spring. And they would like to partner with us again and also bring into the fold then Centennial. I know we had some discussions earlier about, aligned interests, et cetera, et cetera. I think in this case, our interests are very aligned, and it will provide some economies of scale that will bring this effort more in line with what we are able to afford. The sooner we move forward with that, we start getting their services. This scope of service would be for a 9-month period as opposed to 3 or 4 months like we did last time. So we're working with the city attorney on that, and et cetera, and hopefully we'll have something to bring back to you. But just wanted to let you know that that's on the table, and if anyone has any severe objections to hiring a lobbyist at all, or working with Greenwood Village and Centennial, or potentially hiring the lobbyist that we worked with in the spring, if anyone has objections to any of those things, please tell me now before I continue to go down that road.
I only have a quick question. Didn't we for some reason object to Centennial when we first had this debate about whether or not to partner up with various local neighbors?
I don't know that we objected. I think we raised concerns about, would their size make them make our interests not fully aligned, and et cetera,
Well, I think it was more also because Centennial was scorched earth. There was
I know.
show no quarter, which is, by the way, just for my record, that's why I'm happy to be in alignment with Centennial.
I believe
I'm getting there with
strategically,
this conversation.
There was some thought that there might be a divergence of interest at some point in the process, and
Like
to
size
eliminate that possibility of confusing things at the last minute, it was decided.
Which was going to be my comment. I'm all in favor of this. I think it's fantastic. Charge ahead. But at some point in time before the final, I would like to know then what the meeting of the minds was on saying, these are our priorities, these are our principles. This is what this group is going to, these are the tenets that are going to be unassailable. And I'd
Because
like to know what that
Centennial,
is.
like Greenwood, I mean, I don't know what Greenwood's position on this, but Centennial's might be that they're okay with some of the density stuff near. I know that generally speaking, the mayor and most of council was adamantly opposed to all of this and fought it hard. I just have the same concerns I voiced in the spring. I want to make sure we get in bed with the right people. And I know they're hardcore on one side of the spectrum on this. I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're aligned.
So my question on that is, sounds like we're talking IGA, right? But you can just obtain the same services from the lobbyists without necessarily being completely aligned on priorities. However, you could do both too, right? So I'll need some direction on what that should look like down the road, right? If you're just trying to get services and representation back, how that
I think that the benefit of sort of the IGA approach and not just kind of us all individually hiring is that it's a much lower price tag.
Right. So we need some, maybe we draft up kind of what we're talking about.
The price tag that I saw or heard kind of informally, so I don't think this is in stone, was $60,000 total, which if it were divided, would put our part at about 20. And I know we talked about, well, you're bigger and what, but I haven't gone down that path yet, but that's, 60 is probably out of our realm of possibility.
Well, it might be, but I'll be honest, it doesn't sound like a lot of dough for what needs to be done. And granted, Mike, I get concerned about what CML is doing. I mean, this is a big deal, as we all know. And so, if we could get our part done and it was 60, but I mean, that actually doesn't seem like a lot of money for lobbyists. Okay. And the lobbyists that I know at the end of the day. That's number one. Number two, I know we're not going to get away with let's go by population. Okay, that's one way. And then let's divide it 3 ways. That's the other way. There's a lot in between. And so hopefully we can move that in to some direction that is at least proportionately reasonable.
I would agree.
Well, and I'm happy to talk to that. So I will move forward, I guess, I hear no big objections.
No.
All right. So moving on to, did you have?
Yeah, no, I think the other thing it gives us is the lobbyist is representing a much bigger voting block, and that maybe gets us a louder voice.
Yeah, possibly.
Collectively. Are there other locations like Lone Tree, for example, that might be interesting to consider as an addition to this collaborative?
There might be. I don't think we want to replicate like the Metro Mayor's Caucus, for example, or so I don't know that we want to go too big. But I'll be honest, our lobbyist was working on our behalf, but that work benefited, because the bill didn't pass, it benefited everyone who was opposed to it. Right. So, I don't know that once it gets too big, it makes the ability to make decisions and very difficult.
Not as nimble, yeah.
Okay, Councilor Blum.
I just want to say that I think your effort exceeded whatever the lobbyists did. But so, Katie, you've been held in esteem because of that.
Thank you.
This is an important issue that was raised by one of Susan's constituents who came to breakfast with me, and this is for Emily and Jay. Put these 2 bags in front of me and said that they think Cherry Hills is becoming very cheap on these so-called poop bags that have been replaced by this one, which is very dainty. So I told Susan, because she's out of town, that I would give it to Jay or Emily and see if you guys could address that, and then she will get back to the constituents. So I know this is an important item.
I think one of them is biodegradable.
I was going to say we went
This
to
is biodegradable.
Yes, we went to biodegradable bags based on other requests by citizens to do so.
Well, Susan can get back to them and get them the answer. When Susan gets back, she'll talk to you about it. I think whoever gave it to me is probably a constituent of Earl's. But
Well, biodegradable is important, but it's it's important not to end up being with manually degradable if you get it.
so I will leave those with you, Jay.
Message delivered.
I will have.
We appreciate that. The very important stuff we will get done.
I no other.
Councillor Sheldon.
We have an exec session tonight.
Yes.
In light of that, I will have no report tonight.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
No report.
Councillor Holen.
No report other than welcome Jim Thorson officially, your first city manager back in the saddle. The only other thing, I was just curious, did everybody notice? I mean, I know we have an ordinance for fireworks. I basically think the village went crazy with individual personal fireworks. Did anybody notice that? I've had a lot of people tell me that as well, and I noticed it. I was actually worried about my field catching on fire. People, it's like this year, I think, because of all the rain, I think everybody just took off. But nobody else seems to be saying anything, so maybe it was just on Vista Road, I don't know.
One, welcome to Jim. Thank you very much for coming back and joining us. Hopefully we will keep you busy for the year. Two, had a number of constituents who use our public trail system make a comment, and Emily, since you're here, I'll mention it to you specifically, is that right next to all of our signs welcoming people into Buell, there is a sign right when you come in off the public trail or right into Buell that says that the lake is private. And while the lake itself is private, it really comes off as the trail is not a public trail. And a number of people have commented to me that they are scared off of using one of the trails that's on the city map based on the fact that Buell has that sign there. Can we work with Buell's HOA to ask them to soften or make it clearer that use of the lake is private, but the public trail system remains as a way to try and have trail users welcomed into the Buell neighborhood? I think, ironically, one of the people who I think runs that HOA is one of the people who wants us not to be in the HOA or in the neighborhood. Anyway, next is a number of us attended the CML conference. I just wanted to quickly mention three things. One, it reinforced my appreciation for the fact that we all live and get to be on council here in Cherry Hills Village. We don't have to deal with utility departments. We don't have to deal with incredibly, and to the thanks of many of you, we don't have budget deficits like so many of our brethren do. We don't have crime rates. We don't have urban blight problems and property revitalization problems generally in the city. When you sat there and listened to all these people, it was just incredible how fortunate we are to be in Cherry Hills. The vendors that were there that I spoke with were all engaging and helpful. Our friends at Shames Coda spent a lot of time talking to me, including one of the people specifically would like to spend some time talking with me about formulating better concrete ideas on implementing, especially the master plan part about sustainability. No commitments or anything like that, but apparently they have some expertise in that. Next, I'd like to just comment that as Mr. Johnson said tonight, a number of issues within right-of-ways. I know right-of-ways is on one of our study sessions coming up here in the not-too-distant future. I think it goes, the issues that Mr. Johnson mentioned tonight, I think it goes to the idea of, I know a number of properties that have their sprinkler systems extending into the right-of-ways. I think it creates a cloud on title on all those properties, and I don't think the city wants to be in the middle of it. There are for sale signs in my neighborhood that are grossly inside the right-of-way that's up there at Cherry Lane and Parkway that make it seem very much as if they're selling the right-of-way as part of the house that's for sale. And again, I just don't think that's completely appropriate within our right-of-ways. And then two more quick issues. One is the idea about election campaigning. I've had a number of people, and it was something that I've talked to in the past, and I know that Laura Chrisman had the same issue when she was campaigning for different offices, is it's very unfriendly in the Buell neighborhood because of their covenants. And I would like to have an opinion from the city attorney specifically looking at whether or not or clarifying that we're expressing our First Amendment rights that are superseding their HOAs so that we can be there without, I was followed literally for 3 hours by their security police while I was doing campaigning work in Buell. So I think that getting ahead of its perspective, it's not an immediate one. Finally, I'll close by continuing our latest tradition of wishing something personal to the Shelton family, of early wishes for happy anniversary to Dan and his wife on your upcoming anniversary.
Should we sing happy anniversary?
I didn't even put him up to that one.
City manager, any reports? And welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. It truly, truly is an honor to be here again. I had 3 short years away from this chair, and it feels like I never left for some strange reason. It seemed like I went out on a long weekend. I know most all of you. In fact, I know all of the council. Some of you weren't in the council chair when I left, but congratulations, Rob, and Susan isn't here tonight, but I'm familiar with both of you and look forward to working with the entire council. I'm thankful for my old staff and my new staff here. I was always impressed with the previous staff, and I can tell you right now I'm equally impressed with the new staff that we have and some of the new faces, and I'm getting to learn everybody's ins and outs and details, and very professional, and I'm really happy with the staff that we have. So it's great to be here, and look forward to the next year, and hopefully we can get a few things accomplished. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you want to go through, I don't know if you have any order of directors? Mr. Workman, start with you and just go down the line.
Understanding you still have a exec session, I have no update this week.
Thank you. Ms. Black? Mr. Goldie?
Just real quick, as of tonight, we have 102 people have filled out the survey for cellular, and not quite that many people have emailed me to let me know that they could not fill out the survey because they had no cell service.
I called Chris to tell him that needed to be one of the options. Chief Lyons?
Very quickly as well, just as I mentioned earlier, yesterday was the beginning of our new traffic unit, and I know that you all are aware of their duties and responsibilities, but also yesterday was the initiation of our community partnership officer's position. And I know that I've outlined those duties and responsibilities today. They finally were able to make their presence in the neighborhoods and on the trail systems on their new bicycles. So I have nothing but high hopes for that program moving forward. And then lastly, just as a reminder, our next council meeting, August 1st, preceding that meeting is National Night Out, 4:30 to 7:30 next door at Mead Park. Thank you.
Clerk Gillespie.
Just to make sure everyone saw the email that our December meeting we're planning on having on December 6th, which is the first Wednesday instead of the second Wednesday. So just mark your calendars. If you can't come, let me know so we make sure we have a quorum. And as you noticed, Dan and Earl have been our guinea pigs for electronic packets with iPads. So I'll be asking for some feedback from them, and then we'll see what the next step is. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Director Farman.
Just to reiterate, Jim noted that the budget was kicked off today for 2024 proposed budget. And then we also are following some proposed legislation regarding property tax limits. So I'll keep council informed as we go through that, when CML is keeping me informed on that. So thank you.
City Attorney.
Nothing to report, Mayor. I'm glad to welcome Mr. Thorson back. And just want to respond to Councilor Eber's request that for a legal opinion. Those do take time and resources, so I think before I proceed, it would be appropriate for me to get the direction from all of council if that is the way you would like me to proceed.
Okay. And what is the appropriate forum to do that? Do we want to?
You can, by consensus, direct me to work. There's some facts and things that I would need to understand, but
okay.
You can direct me to do that. You can give me some time frames right now. Did you have a discussion or postpone it to another meeting?
Well, the only thing I'd say, and I know you'd appreciate this, is that I don't think we need an opinion, but I'd like to have an advisory letter from council. I think it would make some sense.
I'm just thinking, I'm strong enough that I say, go ahead and call the police. I know that what I'm doing is okay. And, luckily the police officers came and they kind of said, we're not going to tell you to leave, but, I'm confident in my abilities to stand my ground, and I am okay with somebody following me around for 3 hours. The reality is not everybody is. And, I just want to make it clear for future candidates that the Buell is fertile ground for campaigning. Especially if they're running against somebody from the Buell who has an unfair advantage. So, I think it's a legal question that's out there. Could I get in trouble really, for being a candidate who wants to go? I don't care how it's answered, but I think we deserve to have an answer of some level at some time. It is certainly not a rush.
Okay. Well, if we could hold on a formal opinion, I'm wondering if perhaps that might be something that could be added to our candidate information. I think we all know that it's your First Amendment right? It could be just added to the candidate information packet to just say, that a blurb about what is and what is not allowed. I think the reality is that you probably had the right to be there, and they probably have the right to follow you around. As long as they're not, preventing you from being there. So anyway, but if we could hold off on any formal legal opinion, but it is a point well taken. I know we've all had kind of similar experiences. So
We'll keep a placeholder for candidate information and maybe.
Yeah,
revisit
that'd be
that.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, we have an executive session, so I'll.
Ready? I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS sections 24-6-402, 4A, B, and E for the purpose of discussing matters related to the status of the city's legal interest in certain easements that may have been dedicated to the city by way of a subdivision plat, of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions related thereto, and to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators relating thereto. I further move to adjourn the City Council meeting at the conclusion of the executive session.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please take the vote?
Councillor Eber?
Aye.
Councillor Holland?
Aye.
Councillor Wheel?
Yeah, aye.
Councillor Sheldon?
Aye.
Councillor Blum?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. We will go into executive session and then immediately adjourn upon the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Okay.